Oh, hi. I was just meditating, listening to the sounds of the ocean from this app, from my brain waves that are being detected by the Muse headband. To find out more about it, check out choosemuse.com, code TOM. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beats. More information is available over at tomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The new X chair, it's the X3, is just such a big upgrade from even the old X chair, which I think was one of the very best chairs, if not the best chair, office chair on the market. Check it out at xchairtom, T-H-O-M, xchairtom.com. Cameron Hughes travels the world looking for the finest wines and then bottles them in this lot way so that you can save an enormous amount of money. Last night, Louise and I had the 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley. It was extraordinary. You can learn more at chwine.com/Tom. Today we're reading from Henry Oster's book, The Kindness of the Hangman. Even in hell there is hope. He's in his 90s. He's the last survivor of the Jews of Cologne, Germany. A long time ago, I was a 5-year-old German boy, Heinz Adolf Oster. I was an inquisitive, energetic little wise guy with a shock of black hair, a double dose of curiosity, and a limited ability to stand still for any length of time. One of my earliest memories is of walking on the tree-lined sidewalks of Cologne, the majestic, historic German city that was my home, going out with my father to vote in the 1933 German national election. That was, of course, the election that allowed Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist Party, the Nazis, to seize power in Germany. I had no idea how important that day was or what that election would lead to. Nobody did, probably not even Adolf Hitler himself. But I do remember my father, Hans Isidor Oster, taking my hand as we walked out of our apartment and down the street to the voting booth. My father was tall, serious, thin, and respected. People on the street would recognize him, smile, tip their hats to him. Friends stooped down to see me, his little boy all dressed up like little Lord Fauntleroy on our adventure to the voting booth. I remember he smoked cigarettes constantly. It seemed to make him more grand, more mature, more important. It was a rare treat going out with my dad, just the two of us. He was the manager of several small department stores, and he was usually very busy. So, as with most German children and most children in the world over at the time, I spent much more time with my mother than with my father. I remember that after we left the polling place, he took me to a confectioner's shop to get a Schlange, vanilla-flavored Schlangsahne, vanilla-flavored whipped cream, which was kind of like going out for ice cream today. I was very happy. It was a big day for me. I was an only child. I lived with my mother and father in this cosmopolitan, elegant city in western Germany. Cologne was known for its ancient Gothic cathedral, the Dom, its twin towers of lacework masonry thrusting what seemed like miles above the city. We didn't worship in the Catholic Dom, but we were first and foremost a good German family. We had no reason to feel that we were any less German than anybody else. My father was a veteran of the German army, the Wehrmacht. He had fought in the Great War, World War I, just like millions of other German men. He had been wounded in the war. He had a scar on his cheek where a piece of shrapnel had hit him during an artillery barrage. He had been awarded a medal for bravery. He had no reason not to fight for the defense of his country, right or wrong, to fight for his fatherland, like any good German. The only thing that was different about us is that we were Jewish, which at the time wasn't a big thing to me. The only way I could sense any difference between myself and the other German kids I knew was that I went with my family to synagogue every Friday night instead of going to church on Sunday. And I went to a German-Jewish school where we were taught Hebrew among all the other usual subjects. But I had no sense that we were different, no better or worse than any other German family. It was a comfortable, normal life. I was just a restless German kid with a nice family in a busy German city. But when Hitler and the Nazis came to power, just about the time I was old enough to have any idea what was going on around me, everything started to go haywire. The first time I began to feel that there was anything wrong, my first experience of being singled out, being different, being persecuted, was my first day of school in 1934. Like every other kid who went to school for the first time, I was frightened, a little apprehensive. I was 6 years old now, and I was going into the unknown world, away from my mother and father for the first time, ready or not. My parents walked me to school. I was carrying very seriously a little leather backpack with a tiny blackboard, a piece of chalk on a string, and a sponge to use as an eraser. I was wearing knee pants, stockings, and a little hat like a beret, which identified me as a first-year student. Like all the other children, I carried a huge cardboard cone that my parents had given me. It looked like a megaphone or a dunce cap filled with all kinds of lovely things, candies and little toys. It was a German tradition to send kids off on their first day of school with this. We called it Zuckertüte, or sugar cone, to help us feel more comfortable as we went into this strange new world. We weren't allowed to open them. They were tied with red cellophane in the top to keep us from getting at the goodies inside until we got home from school. It was a sort of reward, something to look forward to. Mine was almost as tall as I was, or at least that's the way it felt to me. But when we came out of school that day holding our precious sugar cones, we were smashed by a gang of young Hitler youth, the Deutsches Jungvolk und Junge Model. They were a big, noisy mob waiting outside on the sidewalk, boys and girls a little older than we were. They were all very proud of themselves, all dressed up like Nazi Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. We were scared to death. Some of my classmates were crying. We were little kids, just 6 years old. And now, after our first nervous day of school, we were being attacked by this screaming Nazi mob for no reason. My parents and all the other Jewish kids' parents were waiting outside the school to pick us up and walk us home. But there was nothing they could do to help us. They had all been shoved out of the way by the Hitler Youth leaders, young toughs in their teens and 20s. I remember looking up and seeing a sea of uniforms and angry faces. The people were yelling and taunting at us. These furious kids with their Nazi neckerchiefs, all with the same swastika slides at their throats. The boys had daggers on their belts. They were just kids, 10 to 14 years old, but they each had their little Nazi knives. In the background, we could see the brown shirt Nazi organizers and the proud parents of the Hitler Youth standing with their arms crossed. They were obviously enjoying this, watching their children showing the little Jewish kids who's who and what's what. The kids threw rocks at us. They hit us with sticks. We were all forced to run this gauntlet to escape, to get through to our parents and to safety. The Hitler Youth paid special attention to attacking our Zuckertüten. They bashed at them with their sticks, trying to knock them out of their hands. And when one broke open, they all scrambled on the ground to steal our candies and toys. Eventually, a couple of Cologne city policemen, who were not even necessarily Nazis then, showed up and stopped the attack, giving me and the other Jewish kids enough time to get to our parents. The Kindness of the Hangman by Henry Oster.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook.
Democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Tomorrow, August 1st, is Earth Overshoot Day. It's 2 days earlier than it was last year. That's the day on which we being the human race, have consumed all of the productivity of the entire planet in less than a year. Or at least all of the productivity that's available to us. Basically, Earth Overshoot Day marks the point at which consumption exceeds the capacity of nature to regenerate. It was August 3rd last week. It's August 1st this year, tomorrow. And in part, this has to do with global climate change. And climate change is, in fact, it's the major driver, or one of the major drivers. As I say, 7 billion humans on Earth and a steady move toward more and more meat consumption are big drivers, huge drivers. But they're both driving climate change. So you get this kind of dog chasing its tail feedback loop. I got an email from from the Pentagon. This is from the Office of the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, SIGAR. And it's a quarterly report to Congress. The email is about the key points. It goes to a whole bunch of different military places, and then they send it out to the press. And I'm on their press list, and so here it is. This isn't like, top secret stuff. This is, although, I mean, and here's, I guess, the question. We've got, serious stuff going on right now, and it's just not being reported in our media. I mean, climate change will kill more people than even George W. Bush did. Actually is, as we speak. And in fact, I want to get to that in just a second about Afghanistan. Meanwhile, oh, by the way, coming up on the program today, Russ Baker on war powers, Greg Palast on the Kansas primary, Trump and his billionaire buddies robbing us blind. We'll be getting to all that. But back to Afghanistan. I just got this report from the Pentagon. And they point out, they first of all, they say the situation in Afghanistan is consistent, quote, this is from the Department of Justice, the DOJ, views the situation in Afghanistan as consistent with a largely lawless, weak, and dysfunctional government, with many corruption cases languishing due to the lack of political will rather than the capacity of the Afghan government. But then it gets interesting. They say 2/3 of Afghanistan's provinces are experiencing a drought due to precipitation deficit of 70% in recent months. USAID has told SIGAR that precipitation and snowpack levels have been so low. And keep in mind, snowpack, is like the water battery. It's the charge system. We here in Portland, the mountains around us get a lot of snow in the winter, and then during the summer that snow melts and that feeds the rivers, right? Same thing in Afghanistan. The snowpack levels have been so low that in many areas the current rain-fed winter wheat crop has been effectively lost. The UN estimates that over the next 6 months, more than 2 million people will face severe food insecurity. Severe food insecurity is diplomat speak for starvation. Let me read this sentence again. The UN estimates that over the next 6 months, more than 2 million people will face severe food insecurity and will be in desperate need of humanitarian assistance. Why? Because the climate is changing in Afghanistan. But it's not just in Afghanistan. The Algerian city of Ouargla just set the new recorded high for the entire continent of Africa. This was day before yesterday. No, excuse me, this was a week and a half ago. 124.3 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade. In Texas, multiple cities are reporting runs of 5 or 6 days in a row with temperatures over 100. One day was so hot that the power grid set a new system-wide all-time peak demand record. In an unprecedented heat wave, this is from Daily Kos, a piece by Sherwat Spooner. An unprecedented heat wave in Tokyo, in Japan, has declared the government of Japan has declared a natural disaster. Kumagaya, sitting near Tokyo, is 105.9 degrees Fahrenheit. More than 30,000 people in Japan have been hospitalized for heat stroke. This was as of a few days ago, by the way. In Sweden, 44 wildfires. They're asking all of Europe for help. Heat records are being broken all over Denver, Los Angeles, Montreal, Glasgow, Scotland, Shannon, Ireland, Belfast, Northern Ireland, and many locations in Russia, including Siberia. In the U.S. alone, 9 all-time temperature records have been broken and 10 have tied records. You got boiled bats in Australia, which follows 2017, which is also record-breaking heat. This out of Berlin from the Associated Press. The headline, Animals, Crops Suffering as Europe's heat wave hits new highs. This while the Koch brothers are having their meeting and talking about, gee, we'll reach out to Democrats who agree with our worldview, when their worldview says there's no such thing as global warming because that would cut into our profits from Koch Industries, our oil business. Okay, some region of Germany sweltered in the mercury, 102 degrees Fahrenheit. The German Meteorological Office says the country's all-time record, going back hundreds of years, 104.5 degrees. That record was beat on Tuesday. Rivers like the Rhine and the Elbe have soaked up so much heat that fish are beginning to suffocate. In Hamburg, authorities collected almost 5 metric tons, 11,000 pounds of dead fish. Why is this not in our media? Is it because the networks don't want to lose their advertising revenue from Koch Industries? I don't get it. The low levels of water made shipping more difficult with a complete ban imposed on boats on the Oder River. German farmers expect the grain harvest to be 20% smaller this year over the previous year because it has barely rained in the past 12 weeks. Potato farmers are expecting harvest to be 25% smaller. In Poland, they've banned swimming in over 50 beaches because the ocean, the seas have gotten so, the Baltic Sea has gotten so warm that they're having these massive algae blooms that kill people. You swim in this water, you get rash, and in extreme cases you could die. In Zurich, in Switzerland, the police have put special shoes on their police dogs to prevent them from burning their paws on the scorching streets. And Switzerland has also canceled all fireworks. Across Europe, forest fires are causing major damage. 92 people died in Greece a week earlier this month. Temperatures in Spain, 27 of that country's 50 provinces are extreme risk from heat beginning Thursday. In neighboring Portugal, almost 11,000 firefighters and 56 aircraft are tackling forest fires. In the Banach Peninsula, in northern Norway, this is inside the Arctic Circle. It hit 89.6 degrees Fahrenheit, never happened before. In Denmark, the month of July has been the sunniest since they started recording data in 1920. Now, why is that consequential? Because what's going on here is that global warming is breaking down the ice pack in the Arctic, which is basically like, imagine that your house is hot, and so you put in the attic, a giant ice cube, a giant piece of dry ice, and the cool just kind of settles down into your house and keeps you cool, right? But what happens when that dry ice evaporates? What happens when it melts? Suddenly, the house gets really hot, really fast. Well, that's what's happening in the Arctic right now. The Arctic is starting to heat at a rate that is actually logarithmic. You can see this over at arctic-news.blogspot.com. The graphics and all the science on it, and the links to all the science. And the consequence of that is, as the Arctic warms, while the rest of the world is warming, but the Arctic is warming 6 times faster. The consequence of that is that the difference in temperature between the Arctic and where we are, the mid-latitudes, that difference in temperature is diminishing, is decreasing. In other words, the Arctic is not as cold as it was just, say, 5 years ago. And what that's doing is that difference in temperature between the Arctic and these mid-latitudes is what creates this wall of cold air that flows around the world at about 100 miles an hour called the jet stream. Well, the jet stream is no longer rigid. The jet stream is no longer a stream. It's become a loopy, wavy thing that is dropping all the way down to the equator and then all the way back up again and traveling these long, long paths. It's still moving fairly fast, but traveling those long paths, it's moving horizontally across North America and across Europe and across Asia much more slowly, which means that severe weather, whether it's heat or drought or rain, lasts longer and does massively more damage. Meanwhile, the Huffington Post is reporting, the headline, fossil fuel industries outspend clean energy advocates on climate lobbying by 10 to 1. This is between 2000 and 2016. The study's author, sociologist at Drexel University, Robert Broll, says public opinion is pretty much a minor factor in deciding what Congress is going to do. Why? Because The industry expenditures on federal lobbying aimed at climate issues topped $2 billion during the years of that study, 2000 to 2016. He downloaded nearly 2 million publicly available lobbying files collected by the Center for Responsive Politics to nail this stuff. This is why you're not hearing about this in the media. Why the wildfires in California are being treated like some weird anomalous thing. Gee, when did that start? And nobody's putting, I listen to the BBC every night to get to sleep. And my BBC podcast a couple days ago, the opening story was there are over 700 wildfires burning in North America. North America, from Canada, from the Arctic Circle to Mexico, is on fire because of climate change.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
The Europeans know about it, the BBC is reporting it, the Canadians know it, but we're not allowed to discuss it. And welcome back. Omar in Herndon, Virginia. Hey, Omar, what's on your mind today?
Tom, how you doing today? The other thing I want to add also, the fire in Greece, they blame it on the heat wave.
Yep.
Almost killed like 87 people, almost like.
Oh, like 1,000 people had to go jump in the ocean.
Yeah. It's just terrible. Tom, I don't know when you're going to plan to bring Richard Wolff, the professor.
He's typically on Thursdays.
Thursday, okay, because, this morning I was watching CNBC and Jamie Dimon, the CEO of Chase Morgan Bank, he said that he's really concerned about the market, that he's seeing a sign that he never seen before. And I just wanted to get Mr. Richard Wolff his take on the economy right now. He
has laid this out a number of times on previous Thursdays. And, essentially, he's taking, Richard Wolff has been saying, a lot of the same things that I've been saying, which is that we are in a bubble economy right now. We have been since 2008. It's a bubble that was produced by the Fed lowering the federal funds rate down to, functionally zero for several years there. And, it's in the neighborhood of 1% right now, pushing toward 2%. And the result of this is that there's all kinds of money sloshing around and massive amounts of debt, because it's really, really cheap right now to acquire debt. And there's to get money, to go into debt to get money. And this is happening at the consumer level, this is happening at the business level, and this is happening at the level of government. You had, the Trump administration, the Republicans in Congress with the GOP tax scam just borrowed borrowed $1.5 trillion so far to give a $5 trillion tax cut to the billionaires. And everything is being driven by debt. I think that the bubble is going to come to an end, Omar.
Yeah, and then the interesting thing that Jamie Dimon, he never mentioned this before. This is the first time where he goes on record and he said that he's concerned about the market and the direction that he's heading to. And a couple of weeks ago, Trump was blaming the Fed, just to make sure that he has somebody to blame in case something goes down. But I just thought that was interesting. Now, I hope you dig into that on Thursday when he comes in.
Yep.
Thank you so much for taking my call.
I will do it. Thank you, Omar. Good to hear from you. Let's see here. Yeah, we only have a minute left. I'll pick up your phone calls on the other side of the break. I also want to, speaking of things that cannot be discussed, this is pretty amazing. When George W. Bush's debate notes for his debate with Al Gore in 2000, when those debate notes were stolen and turned over to Al Gore, you know what Al Gore did? He called the FBI. When Jimmy Carter's debate notes were stolen and given to Reagan, Reagan used them. And when Clinton's emails were stolen, the Trump guys, they were all standing there going, hey, let's meet with some Russians in our office and talk about getting those emails. Did I mention that Al Gore called the FBI when he was offered dirt on George W. Bush, specifically the debate notes? I mean, this is an ethics-free, law-free, lawless administration. And just, to my topic of yesterday, how far will they go? I honestly don't know the answer. I hope though, that more and more people are waking up and paying attention and are willing to stand up and speak out, because we really need that. We will be right back. It's 21 and a half minutes past the hour. Oh, hi. I was just meditating, listening to the sounds of the ocean from this app, from my brainwaves that are being detected by the Muse headband. To find out more about it, check out choosemuse.com, code TOM. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Superbeats. More information is available over at tomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The new X chair, it's the X3, is just such a big upgrade from even the old X chair, which I think was one of the very best chairs, if not the best chair, office chair on the market. Check it out at xchairtom, THOM, xchairtom.com. Cameron Hughes travels the world looking for the finest wines and then bottles them in this lot way so that you can save an enormous amount of money. Last night, Louise and I had the 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley. It was extraordinary. You can learn more at chwine.com/Tom.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
So speaking of things that can't be spoken of, right? Speaking of things that nobody is willing to say in the media, and I'm feeling this week, I guess, more than most, like the little boy who cried, or the little boy, excuse me, not the little boy who cried wolf, God forbid, but like the little boy who said the emperor has no clothes, mixing up my fairy tales here, that here we are pointing out, or here I am pointing out, and you too, that this is, that climate change is real and that it is now seriously starting to whack the world. I mean, we're looking at next year probably being the first year that the Arctic is ice-free, which will produce a major shift in our climate. And we're already seeing the early stages of that. This is not a good thing, but the media won't discuss it. They don't want to offend the fossil fuel billionaires. And then there's the issue, and this, tip of the hat to Virginia Heffernan, a op-ed writer for the Los Angeles Times, who says, we need to talk about a forbidden subject, the legitimacy of Donald Trump. And I would add the Republican control of the House and Senate. She notes that there's been a code of silence around this shady victory, and that this victory, first of all, was a technicality. 6 out of the last 7 presidential elections, the Democrat won the majority of the vote, but didn't always assume office. The Supreme Court gave George W. Bush the White House in 2000. The Electoral College gave Donald Trump the White House in 2016. I mean, so you've got this technicality of the Electoral College. Donald Trump actually lost by 3 million votes. You've got all kinds of exit polls showing, particularly in the 5 major swing states, that Donald Trump didn't actually win the election. At the same time that we are being told that at least one foreign country actually successfully hacked into and penetrated our election systems. And in states like Georgia, there is no audit trail. There is no way to know if the votes were changed. And then you've got, of course, this massive disinformation campaign on Facebook and other places, in part funded by American right-wing billionaires and in part apparently run by the Russian military. So what do we do about this? I think that we need to start calling Donald Trump illegitimate and start referring to the illegitimate Republican Congress. And by the way, we have one illegitimate member of the United States Supreme Court, Neil Gorsuch, and Trump wants to put a second one on. Judd Legume of Think Progress just tweeted, just a reminder that someone stole George W. Bush's debate prep book and videotapes and sent it to Al Gore's campaign. Now, this is sort of like, okay, Al Gore's sitting here, and what comes in the mail? George W. Bush's debate books and videotapes of George W. Bush doing the debate. What did Al Gore do? He called the FBI. He said, I don't even want to look at this stuff. You guys come and get it and find out who tried to send this to us. Contrast that with Don Jr. and Daddy saying to the Russians, hey, can you guys help us out in this election? No, collusion doesn't appear in the federal code, but conspiracy does. Just like heist doesn't appear in the federal code. But if you were accused of a bank heist, I guarantee you, you would discover that a heist is illegal, even though the word does not appear in the federal code. I mean, this is just bizarre beyond belief. What do we do about a media? What do we do about a media that is completely ignoring global climate change and the crises that it's producing? 2 million people are going to be starving to death in 6 months in Afghanistan, where we've got soldiers, and we're not even discussing this? 27 minutes past the hour. Instead, we're discussing, oh, the Koch brothers might like a Democrat. Oh, my God.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with your calls and more of the news of the day right after this. Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Settlers, The Mythology of the White Proletariat, The True Story of the White Nation by J. Sakai, published by Morningstar Press in 1989. This is from Chapter 2, The Foundations of Settler Life. The life of European settlers and the class structure of their society was abnormal because it was dependent upon a foundation of conquest, genocide, and enslavement. The myth of the self-sufficient white settler family clearing the wilderness and supporting themselves through their own initiative and hard labor is a propaganda fabrication. It is the absolute characteristic of settler society to be parasitic, dependent upon the super-exploitation of oppressed peoples for its style of life. Never has Euro-American society completely supported itself. This is the decisive factor in the consciousness of all classes and strata of white society from 1600 to now. Settler society was raised up above the level of backward old Europe by a foundation of conquest. This conquest was a miracle drug for a Europe convulsed with the reaction of decaying feudalism and deadly capitalism. Shot into the veins of the Spanish feudal nation, for instance, the miracle drug of the New World conquest gave Spain the momentary power to overrun North Africa, Holland, and Italy before her historical incident waned. Like many such fixes for Euro-Americans, this conquest was addicting. It was habit-forming and rapidly indispensable, not only culturally, but in the mechanism of an oppressor society whose lifeblood was new conquest. We'll examine this later in the relationship of settlerism to imperialism. For now, it's enough to see that this conquest is a material act of great magnitude, an economic and social event as important as the emergence of the factory system or the exploitation of petroleum in the Middle East. We stress the obvious here because the Euro-American settlers have always made light of their invasion and occupation, although the conquered territory is the precondition for their whole society. Traditionally, European settler societies throw off the propaganda smoke screens that they didn't really conquer and dispossess other nations. They claim with false modesty that they merely moved into vacant territory. So the early English settlers depicted America as empty, a howling wilderness, unsettled, sparsely populated, just waiting with a vacant sign on the door for the first lucky civilization to walk in and claim it. Theodore Roosevelt wrote defensively in 1900, quote, "The settler and pioneer have at bottom had justice on their side. This great continent could not have been kept as nothing but a game preserve for squalid savages," end of quote. It is telling that this lie is precisely the same lie put forward by white Afrikaner settlers who claim that South Africa was literally totally uninhabited by any Africans when they arrived from Europe. To universal derision, these European settlers claim to be the only rightful historic inhabitants of South Africa. Or we can hear similar defenses put forward by the European settlers of Israel, who claim that much of the Palestinian land and buildings they occupy are rightfully theirs, since the Arabs had allegedly decided to voluntarily abandon it all during the 1948-49 war.
Are these kinds of tales any less preposterous than those put forward by Euro-American settlers? America was spacious and sparsely populated only because the European invaders destroyed whole civilizations and killed off millions of Native Americans to get the land and profits they wanted. We all know that when the English arrived at Virginia, for example, they encountered an urban, village-dwelling society far more skilled than they were in the arts of medicine, agriculture, fishing, and government. This civilization was reflected in a chain of 300 Indian nations and peoples stretching from the Arctic Circle to the tip of South America, many of whom had highly developed societies. There was, in fact, a greater population in these Indian nations in 1492 than in all of Western Europe. Recent scholarly estimates indicate that at the time of Columbus, there were 100 million Indians in the hemisphere, 10 million in North America, 25 million in Central Mexico, and an additional 65 million elsewhere in Central and South America. These numbers have long been concealed since they give rise to the logical question of what happened to this great mass of people. The European invaders, Spanish, Dutch, English, Portuguese, and French, simply killed off millions and millions to safeguard their conquest of the land and provide the disposable slave labor they needed to launch their new world. Conservative Western historical estimates show that the Spanish reduced, in quotes, the Indian population of their colonies from some 50 million to only 4 million by the end of the 17th century. And from the 10 million Indians who once inhabited North America, after 4 centuries of settler invasion and rule, there were in 1900 perhaps 200,000 to 300,000 surviving descendants in the United States. This was the very substantial down payment towards the continuing blood price that third world nations have to pay to sustain the Euro-American way of life. So when we hear that the settlers pushed out the Indians or forced the Indians to leave their traditional hunting grounds, we know that these are just code phrases to refer politely to the most barbaric genocide imaginable. It could well be the greatest crime in all of human history. Only here, the Adolf Eichmanns and Heinrich Himmlers had names like Benjamin Franklin and Andrew Jackson. The point is that genocide was not an accident, not an excess, not the unintended side effect of virile European growth. Genocide was the necessary and deliberate act of the capitalists and their settler shock troops. The book Settlers.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and let's pick up some of your calls. Ron in Benton Harbor, Michigan. Hey, Ron, what's up?
Hello, Tom. Tom, before I get to the bug issue, real quick, when President Carter knew the books were stolen, he should have made that public, and because he sat on that. And we know Bush was the vice president, and we know Bush was CIA general all the way, so you know who got the books.
Yeah.
And the same thing with President Clinton. He should have demanded the vote count go on and challenge the Supreme Court hacks and say, if we want to have a constitutional fight, we'll have it, but the count goes forward. Now, getting to the bugs, Tom.
Yes, sir.
I live out here in rural Michigan, and you can see this yourself. I have not seen bugs on the windshield or bumper of the car in any mass for years. But it was just brought to my attention this year because of an editorial in New York Times, Sunday, May 27, 2018, in which we have missed the bug Armageddon, not just bees and butterflies, but here in my own case. Since the spring, I've counted, and this is August, I've seen like 2 stink bugs, and they were like all over the place, all right? I mean, I just saw a juvenile on the window yesterday, and the same thing with the hornets. I've seen like 2 or 3, and same thing with butterflies. And I grow milkweeds around my sprayed lawn. Mm-hmm. I've seen like 2 butterflies, a beautiful black one, and a nice one. But check it out yourself. Where are the bugs? I mean, if you go down to Florida, granted, or even the South, you don't see that many bugs.
No, Louise and I were in Orlando a few weeks ago, and we were noticing how, it was kind of bug-free. And in fact, it was bug-free. I never saw any bugs. And then day before yesterday, or Sunday, Louise and I were walking down by the Columbia River, and a tiger swallow, I think they're called, butterfly, the yellow and black ones, with the stripes, flew by. I've seen 3 of those this year, and I haven't seen a single monarch. I haven't seen any other butterflies or moths in this entire year, to the best of my knowledge. And you get the occasional mosquito, certainly, Yeah, it used to be that your summer meant your windshield was covered with dead bugs, and that's very much not the case now. And when we were walking and talking about this, I was like, wow, there's a butterfly, and she's like, yeah, we don't see very many of those. And I looked up in the sky and I said, I don't see very many birds either, other than geese, and hawks and seagulls. I mean, that's basically it. But the swallows, the insect-eating birds, they seem to be vanishing too. There is something going on, and it's something that we need to wake up from our stupor on this stuff and do something about this. We are not impotent. I mean, there are technological solutions to where we're at right now. We could be shifting to renewable energy like that. I mean, solar panels are so cheap right now, notwithstanding Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on Chinese-made solar panels, but they're so cheap right now that solar power is actually cheaper than electricity produced by any other method. And we've got enormous amounts of sunlight right now. And so you've got that, plus we were over in Germany filming for this HBO special of 6-8 months ago, and they've got these machines. They look like washing machines. They're about the same size as a washing machine with a big giant hole in the front, a fan, and they take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And it doesn't require more energy to run them, producing more CO2 than they use. And that technology is there, and we need to start deploying it. So Ron, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Spot on. This is big stuff. Mark in Denver. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good. What's up?
I think we just need to start voting with our wallets and start buying electric cars to fight the Koch brothers. I mean, these things perform better. The storage capacity is better. They're safer. There's all these different benefits, and the best benefit is that they don't pollute. Or they pollute a lot less.
And solarize your home, and if your power company gives you the option of paying an extra, $5 a month to have renewable energy, click that box and, do the things. Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Mark. Thank you. We need to be supporting these efforts. Jeff in Gaithersburg, Maryland. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hey, that was a great call from that previous caller. Basically, I've been attending these climate mitigation working groups that state of Maryland has been hosting. And it's mandatory attendance by people selected by the governor, experts, and the different industries and the climate and environmental experts as well that the state has. Well, anyway, to get to the point, one of the issues is Maryland has identified the big source of carbon dioxide or greenhouse gas pollution comes from our surface transportation. It's our biggest source right at this time.
Right.
I was 2 days from now, when I attend, I'm going to propose that Maryland establish a fee that escalates based on the engine displacement when the automobiles are registered. For combustion engines, if a car has, say, above, not only cars, but all the registered vehicles, were to have a engine size displacement in cc's, anything over 1,000 cc's, and the fee would be, say, for example, another $10 for every additional 500 cc's.
Yeah, I think most Americans would know what you're talking about if you said, cubic inches. Typically engines in the United States run from a little over 200 to, halfway up to 300, 350. 350 the cubic engine is huge, right? But, a big V8.
Yeah.
But that's the range right now. So you're saying that if you're 200 cubic inches, you're good, but if you're 250, you start getting a tax,
No. Forget cubic inches. We're going down to cc's.
All right. So you want to go total metric on us. Okay. I got it, Jeff.
All right. So basically 1,000 cc's, that over that limit, that would even capture, say, like Harley Davidson's.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the only time I ever remember cc's being applied to motor engines was motorcycles. But
well, it just so happens to be that when you look at your cars, you have 2.5 L. That's 2.5 liters. We're already there at cc's.
Right.
Okay, so that's how many of our, even the American engines, are.
So the bottom line
classified.
here, Jeff, is you're saying we need a tax on fossil fuel-based internal combustion engines.
Yeah, because listen, it takes too much time to establish a carbon tax.
Yeah.
That's going to be talked.
No, I got it, and
we
I agree with you.
already have.
I
And
agree
we
with you,
already-
Jeff. Thank you. And let me add, by the way, you said that transportation is the major source of global warming pollution in the United States. Actually, it's not true. The actual major source, when you consider the inputs as well as the outputs, the major source is animal agriculture. But they're neck and neck. They're huge. So you drive an electric car, use solar panels on your house to charge it, and start eating more plants and fewer animals, and you're moving in that direction. Jackie in Port Townsend, Washington. Hey, Jackie, what's up?
Hi. Well, my town is a small town, about 9,000 people, basically a retirement community made up of mostly white people who make a point of reducing their carbon footprint on a daily basis. However, I've been keeping track over the past couple of years, and I personally know about 60 people who fly to Europe, not for visiting family or for work, but for fulfilling their bucket list. Mm-hmm. And this is each year. And I have children, and on their behalf, I've decided that I cannot, in good conscience, blow up my carbon footprint, but will live vicariously instead of fulfilling a bucket list, with the caveat that if my kids moved to Europe, I would go visit them.
Sure. Well,
But
jet transportation is a lot more efficient than any other form of transportation. I mean, massively more efficient. And you can also buy carbon offsets every time you fly.
Well, that may be true, but I think we have to make sacrifices these days because the rubber is hitting the road, so to speak.
Yeah. I agree with the sentiment, Jackie, and broadly, I agree with it. The problem is that this is something that if all of us, or some large fraction, I say 20% of the American population, which would be huge, right, said, that's it, I'm not going to fly anymore, I'm not going to use internal combustion engines anymore, I'm going to take bicycles everywhere I go, I'm going to stop eating meat altogether, that wouldn't be enough. What we need is policy changes. This has to happen at a political level. This has to happen at the level of government. As long as we've got governing parties, aka the Republican Party, and a couple of Democrats, denying that global warming is real, denying that we're driving ourselves into a ditch here, we've got a much bigger problem than deciding whether or not to get on an airplane. Although, I salute your effort, Jackie, and I think it's a marvelous thing what you're doing, but it's sort of like the families that decided. Bill McKibben wrote this book, Just One, and he only had one child because he saw population growth as a major problem. Well, that's an effort. It's a step. It's symbolically great, and it impacts people around you by the power of your example. That's all wonderful stuff. And we need to turn this into policy nationwide. I'm sorry, Jackie.
Well, we still have responsibilities, and it's not a big sacrifice.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad. I'm very glad. Jackie, thank you for the call, and thanks for talking with us. Mark in San Diego. Hey, Mark, what's up? Mark in San Diego? No, Mark. Okay, let's try Scott in New Haven, Connecticut. Hey, Scott, what's on your mind today?
Hi, how are you? I'm just a little concerned about the way the Democratic Party is turning into a socialist party, and it's almost driving me out.
What does socialist mean to you, Scott?
What?
What do you mean by that? Are you talking about the Democratic Party being in support of Medicare for all?
I'm a Democrat. My father was a Democrat, and I feel the values that we had as a Democratic Party 10 years ago or even 5 years ago are completely gone. It's turning into a socialist
Please give me an example.
Oh, how about Tom Perez at the DNC?
That's not an example. Please give me an example of some policy that you think used to be the Democratic Party's policy and is now being usurped by socialism. Can you name one?
Well, I don't want this country into a socialist nation, and Venezuela is...
You don't know what that means.
A socialist
We're already a socialist nation. We have Social Security. We've been a socialist nation since 1935. We were conceived as a socialist nation. We have a nationwide postal service.
Well, I hope people look at the hashtag walk away because everybody's got a great opinion.
Yeah, the Republicans are really pushing that thing, aren't they, Scott? Good luck, Charlie. We see right through you. Yes, I'm a Democrat. Oh, please, Democrats, walk away. Don't vote. Don't show up. Oh, man. These Republican efforts to trash the Democratic Party and say, oh, my God, I'm so worried. The concern trope, right, that you just heard from Scott, are so pathetic. I mean, you really think, Scott, you really think that you're going to keep billionaires like Donald Trump and the Koch brothers in power, in control of the Republican Party with this kind of stuff? No, I'm sorry. The Democrats are coming, and we're gonna win.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And I'm talking the real Democrats who find their grounding in Franklin Roosevelt and Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty. We're coming. And welcome back. Gary in Minneapolis. Hey, Gary, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Yeah, I was listening to you earlier, and you talked about that Arctic News website, and I looked it up.
Arctic-news.blogspot.com, yes.
Yeah, and I looked it up, and there was an article in there from CBS News that went down every single thing that you just talked about. Mm-hmm. The Arctic, warming up, and the air flows, and all the fires, and all the records being broken, and everything. All the facts that you were talking about.
Right.
Not once did they use the term global warming.
Yeah. Well, point made. it's like let's talk about every dimension of this, every aspect of it, but never actually discuss what is actually going on here. And by the way, Gary, I'll bet that article appeared once.
Say again?
I'll bet that article appeared once. You would think that with literally people all around the world starving, with countries being overthrown, I mean, the whole Arab Spring thing was the result of the desert moving south. The price of wheat went up in Tunisia, which caused that young man to light himself on fire, which sparked the Arab Spring. The price of wheat went up because the crops were being wiped out. The desert came south more than 100 miles in the last decade. And that triggered the Syrian civil war, it triggered the Tunisian civil war, it triggered the Egyptian civil war. That's what's going on. You would think that with that going on, with Afghanistan facing within 6 months mass starvation, that we would be paying attention, that this would be on the news every night.
I know.
You know?
I know, it's incredible, but what I found so interesting was all the facts that you talked about, they were talking about. Mm-hmm. Every single one of them, but they never used the term global warming. It was incredible.
Yeah, it truly is. It truly is. Thanks a lot for the call, Gary. Great to hear from you. Let's see here. Beverly in Muskegon, Michigan. Hey, Beverly, what's up?
Hi. I know this isn't anything to do with your topic, but I just found out that Jeff Sessions made a task force for religious liberty, and they are saying they're going to protect religion. But what religion? And are we having religion in our government now? And should we be afraid?
Well, yes, we should be. Afraid is the wrong word. We should be concerned, and we should get activated. Betty Bowers is tweeting about this today. By the way, if you follow a Twitter feed, it's really worth watching the little video that she just put up on Twitter.
Yeah, I hadn't heard anything about it until just a bit ago, and I thought, we can't have this.
Yeah, this is Jeff Sessions and Mike Pence, the two uber Christians trying to make America safe for Christianity. And as a Christian, I'm highly offended. Jesus does not need their help. Thank you very much, and neither do the rest of us. It's just so wrong. But yes, that's what's going on, Beverly.
And they keep it quiet. It's not. I don't hear about it anywhere on TV.
Oh, it's all over in the right-wing media. They're loving it. And this is Jerry Falwell's going to make an extra $1 million this year. It's just they're all and they're going to be able to engage in political activity without having to lose their tax-exempt status. I mean, all kinds of stuff that, from their point of view, is just wonderful. Yes, theocracy for all. Beverly, thank you for the call. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 9 minutes before the hour.
hi. I was just meditating, listening to the sounds of the ocean from this app, from my brainwaves that are being detected by the Muse headband. To find out more about it, check out choosemuse.com, code TOM. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Superbeats. More information is available over at tomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The new X chair, it's the X3, is just such a big upgrade from even the old X chair, which I think was one of the very best chairs, if not the best chair, office chair on the market. Check it out at xchairtom, THOM, xchairtom.com. Cameron Hughes travels the world looking for the finest wines and then bottles them in this lot way so that you can save an enormous amount of money. Last night, Louise and I had the 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley. It was extraordinary. You can learn more at chwine.com/Tom.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Chris in Albuquerque, New Mexico, listening on KABQ. Hey, Chris, what's up?
Hey, Tom. We're in the monsoon season over here in New Mexico. I just kind of wanted to report to you.
You mean it's raining?
Experience. Well, yeah, it's been raining, but yesterday we had about I'd say 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch hail, and it was ice.
Wow.
And it went from 105-degree weather, to that in the afternoon. And my wife thought it was kind of odd. And, all of the reports of fires, and it's just kind of scary. But the corporate media though, and we need to kind of get rid. The Koch brothers are just wreaking havoc, and the likes of the Koch brothers. The hail was just kind of odd. We do have a lot of good things going on though. New Mexico is we're really charged to have some women in power. I don't know if you're aware, Tom, but we're poised to make history here come this November. Deb Haaland is running for Congress, and she's a Native American from Laguna Pueblo. We have a strong Democrat, Michelle Lujan Grisham, that's running for governor as well. I just turned in signatures a little while ago on a ballot initiative for public financing for mayoral candidates as well as city council candidates. So we've got a lot of good things and we would love to, for you to come to New Mexico too.
That is great.
I'm going to try to. Yeah, I'm sorry?
That would be great. Talk to the folks at KABQ, and maybe we can set something up. By the way,
I sure will. I'll give them a call.
Just as you're working on this issue, I just saw this article on Common Dreams. 70% of Democrats, 67% of Republicans, and 60% of independents want the Supreme Court's Citizens United ruling to be overturned. 60% of independents, 67% of Republicans, 70% of Democrats say no. And this at the time that Trump is going to, wants to put Brett Kavanaugh on the court, who is gung-ho for Citizens United. He loves Citizens United. Chris, thanks for the heads up, and I'd love to see you in Albuquerque. Thanks for the information. Denise in Land of Lakes, Florida. Hey, Denise, thanks for listening to SiriusXM. What's up?
Hi, Tom. I was calling regarding your issue towards policy change, towards environmental issues.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree. Right now in Florida, we are seeing an unusual outbreak of red tide. While red tide is a normal occurring, thing that happens in Florida, just seeing the increased amount of red tide that's occurring is not normal.
Yes.
So the people of Sarasota are protesting policy changes because their beaches have been hit. But also, my family and I were vacationing in Sanibel, which is Captiva Sanibel, which is in Lee County.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea that they had an outbreak there. There was no statewide health warning. We go down there. There's no signs on the beach. Come to find out, Mike Pence owns property on Sanibel Island. So I don't want to get into conspiracy theories, but I thought it was really interesting that there was no health code warning about, what can happen. Like when you have, pulmonary diseases or respiratory diseases, you can suffer from asthma-like conditions when there's an outbreak of red tide.
Right.
So my family and I, we're all on the beach. And, we're coughing, and then come to find, dead sea life all over the beach, and just this awful smell of death. And again, I live in Florida, had no idea that this is happening down in Lee County. Go on the website for Googling what's happening in Lee County, and come to find out that they've had a red tide epidemic since October, just after Hurricane Irma, and it's all related to Big Sugar. And all the levees in Lake Okeechobee have been overflowing and causing this pollution to happen, and increased pollution happening in
What's
our
Big
Gulf
Sugar's
waters.
role in this?
I'm sorry?
What's Big Sugar's role in this? We have just 15 seconds left, by the way, Denise.
Oh, I'm sorry. They just keep dumping money into politicians to have rollbacks and policies.
I see.
Apparently there's no link to, those pollutants in our waters and just,
Oh, I see. Hey, you're saying that sarcastically,
up
right?
on the beaches.
Yeah, I get
Sorry?
it. Yeah, you're saying that sarcastically. There's no link because, obviously there's a link, and this thing with Citizens United is another example. The Trump administration is thinking about giving billionaires a $100 billion tax break by changing how capital gains taxes are calculated. Capital gains taxes are only paid by the top 1/10 of 1%. $100 billion. It's like they don't care about us, Denise. It's tragic.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Oh, hi. I was just meditating, listening to the sounds of the ocean from this app, from my brainwaves that are being detected by the Muse headband. To find out more about it, check out choosemuse.com, code TOM. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Superbeats. More information is available over at tomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The new X chair, it's the X3, is just such a big upgrade from even the old X chair, which I think was one of the very best chairs, if not the best chair, office chair on the market. Check it out at xchairtom, THOM, xchairtom.com. Cameron Hughes travels the world looking for the finest wines and then bottles them in this lot way so that you can save an enormous amount of money. Last night, Louise and I had the 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley. It was extraordinary. You can learn more at chwine.com/Tom. For our book club today, we're reading from Thomas Frank's book, Rendezvous with Oblivion, Reports from a Sinking Society. This is chapter 1, titled Servile Disobedience. Social scientists have tried for more than a century to understand how class works. Psychological experiments on the subject, however, are a relatively novel thing, so I was surprised to discover a few years ago that psychologists had published a series of papers on the behavioral aspects of social status, and that their findings were almost uniformly unflattering towards society's winners. In one 2009 study in Psychological Science found that in conversations with strangers, high-status people tend to do more doodling and fidgeting, and also to use fewer engagement cues, looking at the other person, laughing, nodding their heads. A 2010 paper published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that lower-class individuals, in quote, turned out to be better performers on measures of such pro-social virtues as generosity, charity, and helpfulness. A third study found that those of higher status were noticeably worse at assessing the emotions of others or figuring out what facial expressions mean. All of which is to say the rich are different from you and me. They are more rude and less generous. They don't understand, they don't get what others are thinking, and apparently they don't really care. Perhaps this is obvious to you. After all, people don't design toxic debt obligations by calling on what they learned in Sunday school. Still, the research aroused media interest. The Christian Science Monitor's 2010 account of one study ended with this quotation from Michael Krauss, then the University of California, San Francisco, who was one of the researchers, quote, "Being empathic is one of the first steps to helping other people. One of the first things we're really interested in is what can make wealthy people, affluent people, the people with the capacity to give, what can make them empathic?" I think I see the urgency of Dr. Krauss's question. After all, we have spent the past several decades doing everything we could to transfer the wealth of the nation into the bank accounts of the affluent to send them victorious, happy, and glorious long to reign over us. Oh, we've cut their taxes, gladly transferring much of the cost of keeping their property safe onto our own shoulders. We've furnished them with special megaphones so that their voices can be heard over the hubbub of the crowd. We've conferred upon them separate and better schools, their very own transportation system, and a full complement of private security guards. We've built an entire culture of courtiers and sycophants to make their every working hour an otherworldly delight. We let them construct a system of bonuses and executive compensation on the theory that it would be good for everyone if the people at the top got to take home much, much more than the rest of us. And when it turned out that the theory was wrong, that in the most famous cases, executives chased bonuses not to the shareholders' benefit, but at their expense, why, we promptly bailed them out. We allowed them to step into the Fed's discount window and fill their pockets. We generously transferred their reckless investments to our balance sheet, and we chastised them with little more than a polite request that they please not do it again. We've done everything we can to lift them up and exalt them as the new Leviathan. The least they can do in return, one feels, is to show a little empathy. Besides, look what we've done with the old Leviathan, the government. For decades, we've attacked it, redirected it, outsourced it, and filled it with incompetence and cronies. Yes, it still works well enough when we need to blow up some small country, but those branches of it designed to help our Americans of lower socioeconomic status, in quotes, as the scientists would put it, are now bare. We need the rich to be nice. We need them to stop doodling, paying it, and to pay attention and get generous. Now that the government has divested from the empathy business, we need the rich to discover brotherly love and fast. Come to think of it, wasn't that supposed to be the deal in the first place? The arrangement Andrew Carnegie brokered over a century ago when he made his big career move from Steel King to public library baron? The laissez-faire social contract would grant private business a free hand, but in exchange, those who piled up massive wealth were supposed to extend a magnanimous hand to the rest of us. As Carnegie wrote in his famous 1889 essay, The Gospel of Wealth, we don't need socialism to solve our problems. Philanthropy is the true antidote for the temporary inequality distribution of wealth and reconciliation of the rich and poor, quoting Carnegie. Going further, Carnegie argued that the duty of the man of wealth was, quote, to consider all surplus revenues which come to him simply as trust funds, which he's called upon to administer in the manner which, in his judgment, is best calculated to produce the most beneficial results for the community. The man of wealth thus becoming the mere trustee and agent for his poorer brethren, end quote. That same way of thinking led Carnegie to support the estate tax. Of all forms of taxation, this seems the wisest, he wrote. It was wise because it would, quote, induce the rich man to attend to the administration of wealth during his life. And if he didn't, then the tax would return most of his hoardings to the community from which it came, using Carnegie's words. Vestiges of the Carnegie attitude survive to this day. 2009 study of high net worth individuals by Barclays Wealth confirmed that American philanthropists tend to understand their giving in a context in which the state is either absent or irrelevant. And of course, there are plenty of nice plutocrats who don't fidget or doodle when talking to strangers and who have no problem endowing a ward or a wing in return for a commemorative plaque. The business headlines even occasionally tell of billionaires coming together under the leadership of Warren Buffett and Bill Gates to donate their fortunes to worthy causes. But the billionaires with the strongest sense of class solidarity have a very different plan for their disposable income, activating their lobbyists in Washington, building grassroots movements to march on their behalf, and using their media properties to run experiments on human credulity. Rendezvous with Oblivion.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us, actually helps if I click the right button here. On the line with us is Russ Baker, the investigative journalist, founder and editor-in-chief of WhoWhatWhy.org. He's the author of Family Secrets, The Bush Dynasty, America's Invisible Government, and the Hidden History of the Last 50 Years. WhoWhatWhy.org, the website, and you can tweet him at Real Russ Baker, RUSSBAKER. Russ, welcome back to the program. It's been a while.
Hey, Tom. Great to talk to you.
Great to have you back on. I wrote a piece over the weekend that's up on Alternet and Common Dreams and whatnot, suggesting that Donald Trump might use, if he finds himself in the position of a cornered rat, that bad things might happen, and that in fact we have a history of presidents using things like manufactured crises or even real crises, 9/11 for example, and wars. George W. Bush lying us into the Iraq War to serve their political ends. I mean, and I wanted to get you on to talk about it. In fact, I quote you in the article, your interview with Mickey Herskowitz, that this is not a new story. Can you speak to that and tell us the story of George W. Bush before he even ran for president?
Sure. When I was working on my book, it became Family of Secrets, I chased a fellow named Mickey Herskowitz, a very well-known Texas journalist, author of a lot of books on major figures, and friendly with the Bush family. And I knew that Mickey had worked for a while on a biography, a campaign biography of George W. Bush when he was running for president of the United States. 2000. The book they were working on was in 1999. And I wanted to hear what happened to Mickey and why he left the project. And I kept trying to talk to him. He wouldn't talk to me. Finally, at the last minute, as I was heading for the airport in Houston, he contacted me, and we met for a bowl of soup. And fortunately, I had my tape recorder and brought it and turned it on. And boy, what a story he told me. He told me about what it was like to work with George Bush on this book. And we don't have the time to go into all that, but Bush gradually became more and more unguarded. And one of the things Mickey had asked him was, what are you going to do, as president? And Bush wasn't even that sure. He said, talk to Karl Rove about that. But he pressed him. He said, no, he wanted to get it from him. And he said, well, I'll tell you one thing I'm going to do. I'm not going to make the mistake my father made with Iraq. He said, if I get a chance to go in, I'm going in. I'm going all the way. And he said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, with the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, his father had stopped there driving him out of Kuwait and had not rolled him up and taken over Iraq. And he said, if I get a chance, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into Iraq and I'm going to invade and I'm going to win. And Mickey Herskowitz was so stunned by this. So he said to George W. Bush, why are you going to do that? He said, let me tell you something. When I worked when my father was vice president and I was working in the Reagan White House, he said, one thing was made very, very clear to us. If you want to be president, and you want to have higher approval ratings, you must be seen as commander-in-chief. You must be seen leading the troops.
Is this why Reagan invaded Grenada?
Yeah, he said basically that all these people around them, and particularly Dick Cheney, who at the time was a powerful congressman, that it was Dick Cheney's notion that you had to have a small, winnable war. And as you say, Reagan with Grenada and Bush's father, George H.W. Bush, with his invasion of Panama, tiny places, there was no way they were going to lose these things. And they thought it was just a win-win. And plus, they were very excited about what Margaret Thatcher had pulled off with the Falklands War against Argentina, and they just were rhapsodizing about the flowers and the music and her giving these triumph speeches in Parliament and everybody being so happy. He said, your ratings go right through the roof. The American people love a good war, and he said, I'm going to be able to pass my whole agenda, and it's just going to be a cakewalk. And so that's what he planned to do. This story.
This was before the election. This was before George W. Bush had even won the primary.
This is before 9/11. It's before all the reasons. And actually, Tom, as I mentioned in Family of Secrets, there was one public occasion after Bush told this to Herskowitz, he actually said it in a candidate forum. I believe it was in New Hampshire. It's in the book. But he said, I can actually quote from it if you want. He said, Bush said, here it is, New Hampshire. He says,
This is in a public forum.
They asked him about in a public forum. They asked him about Saddam's weapons stash, and he says, "I'd take them out. I'd take out the weapons of mass destruction." Look, he's using that term already, and he said, "I'm surprised he's still there." And they just didn't know what to make of it. They thought maybe he was just just playing loose, and that thing never got picked up. I mean, it was reported, I think in the Boston Globe, but I mean, it never got any attention, and that was our warning.
Now we've had
the United States. Yeah, go ahead.
We've had the downside of this. It played out pretty well. I mean, there's a fellow by the name of Enrique Ruiz Williams, who was one of the two leaders of the Bay of Pigs invasion, and Lamar Walter and I wrote a book basically about him called Legacy of Secrecy. And Harry was in the White House with Lyndon Johnson and Bobby Kennedy about a month after Jackson's assassination. On December 5th, they had this plan to attack Cuba, to invade Cuba. And this was like December 1st. And it was a week after. And Bobby and Harry were saying to Lyndon Johnson, we need to continue with this plan to attack Cuba, which LBJ didn't even know existed. And LBJ was like, I've had enough of these effing Cubans, because at that point, Johnson actually thought Castro had been involved in the assassination of Kennedy. He said, I'm going to make my stand against communism, which was, an obligatory thing, as far as I can get, as far away from here as I can get. I'm going to do it in Vietnam. And we all know how that turned out. Johnson thought he'd have a little war that he could use to demonstrate how tough he was on communism. And then, of course, Bush's little war with Afghanistan and his little war with Iraq are still going on. Do you think that the American people will fall for this again?
Yeah, because it's never been discussed. I mean, this is the key point. My story, which I got, I hadn't written the book yet. I got this story in 2004, and I couldn't get the media to cover it. They said this is too explosive, and they just ignored it. So he got reelected. I don't think he would have been reelected if this story had come out. Now, of course, if this had come out at the time, maybe he wouldn't have been elected. But Tom, we're talking about plunging America into perpetual war everywhere, pretty much. The whole world changed. America changed because of this. 9/11 arguably was directly connected to all of this. And yes, I think that Trump is aware of the value of a war, and I think it's an extremely dangerous position. And I do blame the media in part, because if they're not going to talk openly about what happened in the past, we are condemned to repeat it.
Yeah, this is Thomas Jefferson referred to this as bella omnia et omnia, or omnia. Well, I forget the exact Latin, but it was the war of all against all. I think he was quoting Thomas Hobbes. So Russ, we're talking with Russ Baker, the reporter and author of Family of Secrets, this book about George W. Bush and the Bush dynasty. whowhatwhy.org is the website. Russ, you're an astute, I've always had a lot of respect for your political instincts, an astute political observer. What do you think Trump is most likely to do if he finds himself backed into the corner? If he's looking at having his entire family business, his empire, wiped out by the kinds of charges that Paul Manafort is suffering under right now, bank fraud and stuff like that, or having his political dynasty wiped out by the exposure of his conspiracy with other foreign governments, specifically Russia, I guess, in this case. And what might he do?
Well, it's a very simple calculation. You need something so big that you can take everything else off the table. And, of course, you know this. We work in a large news organization. If there is some disruption, I mean, whether it's a war or an attack like 9/11 or something, everything else is gone. It's gone, and people say it's just not, it's in bad taste to talk about this other thing. Maybe we'll deal with it later, but right now we're focused. We're all pulling together. We're one country. This is what we're always told. Everybody sing the same tune, and we saw that with Iraq. We saw every major network with their patriotic music and the whole number, and no questioning and embedding with the troops. they're ready to go. And this is, of course, extremely, extremely dangerous. Is it Iran? I mean, maybe. Is it some other thing? Can you create a situation? I mean, I think they did it with Grenada. I mean, those weren't real situations. Panama, those were not real situations. So they've done it before, fully capable of doing it again. It could happen anywhere.
Yeah, remarkable stuff. Russ Baker, whowhatwhy.org is the website. Russ, thanks a lot for dropping by and talking with us.
Thanks, Tom.
I appreciate it. I wanted to just get some clarity on all this stuff, and Russ is the guy. Okay, we'll continue our conversation about where we might be going and how we got here, and really about why aren't we all talking about all these things, whether it's climate change or Trump.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
How timid, how frightened has our media become? We'll be back. And welcome back. Katie in Hamul, California. Hey, Katie, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
That about jets not using much fuel.
I'm sorry. Start over again, Katie. Please start over again.
I was just really glad for you to say how efficient jets were, because I have to go visit my kids and my husband in Australia, in 2 days. But anyhow, what I'm calling about was your population or your climate change question. And I think a few years ago I called and talked to you about this. That I'm just a couple of years older than you, but you must remember the time when ZPG, zero population growth, was completely just so embraced. Yes. By the liberal-minded community, and I have a stamp that was put out by the U.S. Post Office in about 1971 or 72 that shows a family of four and says ZPG on it. Whoa. And then it became toxic among liberals to ever even mention it. Yeah. I don't know about conservatives. I'm sure they were never on board with it. But just and to this day, I brought the subject up of population control after a Democratic meeting with a couple of friends, and they were uncomfortable. And it really floored me, because carrying capacity was a phrase, a term that we all knew back then. It doesn't matter what color you are. If you use too many resources, the carrying capacity of the land can't sustain it. So I think what happened with liberals is that they bought into the message that somebody put out there that population control applied to people of color, as we're saying, and not to white people. But it was on the contrary. It was the people who used, back in the day, it was the people who used the most resources, the Western nations, the first world nations, as it were the ones that needed to watch their, be careful of their population growth more than any other. And now it's gotten to be moot that there's just simply no carrying capacity for the entire globe.
Yeah, at the end of July.
My mother had 3 daughters and didn't want grandchildren, and I was the only one that produced a couple of kids, and I want grandpuppies. I mean, it's just really too much. Yeah. And but it still can't be brought up, and that just makes me nuts, because it's not race, it's not culture, it's not anything.
Katie, I remember those times. Forgive my interrupting, we only have 40 seconds left. I remember those times too, and I remember the blowback. My recollection is that the first blowback came from the Catholic community. What, you're telling us we have to use birth control? That's against our religion. How dare you tell us how to run our religion? Then on the back end of that came this campaign saying, oh, you're actually advocating genocide because you want to stop people of color from having babies, which, as you point out, was never even part of the discussion or the equation. But there are still echoes of that even in the black community of, that's, and the anti-abortion people have picked that up as well, saying, oh, this is just another tool for genocide. So it got really muddied, it got really confused. But that was around the time that Bill McKibben wrote that book, Just One, and spot on. Katie, I got to run, but thank you for the call.
it is a big issue. And, you know, come August, Louise and I will have 3 grandchildren, all adopted. That's kind of cool. One is an adopted child. The other 2 are, what would you call it? Second marriage for our daughter kids. Step grandchildren? Yeah, whatever. Anyhow, we'll be right back. Oh, hi. I was just meditating, listening to the sounds of the ocean from this app, from my brainwaves that are being detected by the Muse headband. To find out more about it, check out choosemuse.com, code TOM. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Superbeats. More information is available over at tomsbeats.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The new X chair, it's the X3, is just such a big upgrade from even the old X chair, which I think was one of the very best chairs, if not the best chair, office chair on the market. Check it out at xchairtom, THOM, xchairtom.com. Cameron Hughes travels the world looking for the finest wines and then bottles them in this lot way so that you can save an enormous amount of money. Last night, Louise and I had the 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley. It was extraordinary. You can learn more at chwine.com/Tom. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. A lot going on here. Jim in Longtree, Colorado. Excuse me. Jim, thanks. You're on the air. Thanks for calling. Jim, I'm not hearing you.
Hello.
It's sounding all mumbled. Hello? Okay, Jim, you're on the air. What's up?
Yeah, these people that have a carbon footprint, quit having kids.
Yeah, well, we all have carbon footprints, but...
yeah, but I do have a solution is we take away the tax deduction for having babies.
Yeah, I think that's something that has long ago outlived its usefulness. And again, I'm not trying to preach to parents that they shouldn't have kids or to anybody else. This is something that should be dealt with at a systems level, at a political level, at a large level. I mean, your point is well made, Jim, but it's not. You know, it's so easy to blame the average person, and this is what the fossil fuel industry has done forever. Oh, it's your fault for driving your car. No, it's not. It's their fault for lobbying like hell to have laws that make fossil fuels cheap and internal combustion engines the thing and all that kind of stuff. It's so similarly with population. I mean, this is, there are lots of things that we could do to decrease human population over time, and we could do them in ways that are ethical and reasonable. But we don't even have that conversation anymore because it violates some people's religion and it violates other people's sense of freedom and all these other things. So, where do we go with this? JC in San Francisco. Hey, JC, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I was going to talk about the call, the faux Democrat who called saying, didn't understand socialism, because General Eisenhower was probably the biggest socialist in the last half century leader. By building by leading the socialist army against the Axis powers, and then by doing stuff like establishing the interstate freeway system.
Right.
And he never gets credit for that. But I appreciate what you read on Rendezvous with Oblivion by Thomas Frank, because that kind of wraps it up even better.
Okay.
But what I was going to point out, though, is we need to pursue these cases where unarmed black men and women who get shot by police get prosecuted criminally, not just civilly, but criminally. And we only recently did that here in the Bay Area when Oscar Grant was shot, and it was all videotaped. And the guy claimed that he pulled his gun, or he claimed that he was trying to pull his taser, and he shot him with a gun, killed him while he was on the ground on his face.
Right.
And that's never happened in my estimation in the last 50 years of being in California, ever, where a
cop has been charged with murder.
and sent to prison. Well, not prison, but you know, he got 8 months in prison. But that's never happened. And those kinds of cases need to be pursued. And what I said last week when I called and I said that, you know, the long game is that it's not about black and white. It's about the rich and poor and the haves and have-nots. I'm not denying that the
it's also about black and white.
Right. Yeah. And I would even go farther, you know, back to what Karl Popper was arguing about back in the end of the 90s, where he was saying, you know, overpopulation is our number one problem on the planet. And they shouted him down, so he couldn't say that, I think. Anyway. But that's all I wanted to throw out for the discussion today.
Well said, JC. Thanks for weighing in. Apropos of the first half of what JC had to say about how, you know, well, I had this caller earlier who's like, I'm a member of the Democrat Party, and so was my parents, and I'm worried about the Democratic Party becoming socialist. And I'm like, can you give me one example? No, I don't have any examples. I just want to complain and tell people to check out the hashtag Walk Away, which is this Republican effort to tell Democrats that they shouldn't vote in the upcoming election. And they're calling into my talk show? Really? I think that we should go back to Harry Truman. Harry Truman said, Republicans approve of the American farmer. They're willing to help him go broke. They stand four square for the American home, but not for housing. They're strong for labor, but they're stronger for restricting labor's rights. They favor the minimum wage. The smaller the minimum wage, the better. They endorse educational opportunity for all, but they won't spend money for teachers or schools. They think modern medical care and hospitals are fine for people who can afford them. And it continues. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Truman wraps up that little riff by saying, Republicans admire the government of the United States so much that they would like to buy it. Today we're reading from Martha Nussbaum's new book, The Monarchy of Fear, a philosopher looks at our political crisis. This is from the introduction. There's a lot of fear around in the U.S. today, and this fear is often mingled with anger, blame, and envy. Fear all too often blocks rational deliberation, poisons hope, and impedes constructive cooperation for a better future. What is today's fear about? Well, many Americans feel themselves powerless, out of control of their own lives. They fear that the American dream, the hope that our children will flourish and do even better than you have done, has died, and that everything has slipped away from them. These feelings have their basis in real problems. Among others, income stagnation in the lower middle class, alarming declines in the health and longevity of members of this group, especially men, and the escalating costs of higher education at the very time that a college degree is increasingly required for employment. But real problems are difficult to solve, and their solutions take long, hard study and cooperative work toward an uncertain future. It can consequently seem all too attractive to convert that sense of panic and impotence into blame and the othering of outsider groups such as immigrants, racial minorities, and women. They have taken our jobs, or wealthy elites have stolen our country. The problems that globalization and automation create for working-class Americans are real, deep, and seemingly intractable. Rather than face those difficulties and uncertainties, people who sense their standard of living declining can instead grasp after villains, and a fantasy takes shape. If we can somehow keep them out, build a wall, or keep them in their place in subservient positions, we can regain our pride and, for men, their masculinity. Fear leads then to aggressive othering strategies rather than to useful analysis. At the same time, fear also runs rampant among men people on the left who seek greater social and economic equality and the vigorous protection of hard-won rights for women and minorities. Many people who are dismayed by the election are reacting to it as if the end of the world is at hand. A majority of my students, many acquaintances, many colleagues feel and say often with anguish that our democracy is on the verge of collapse, that the new administration is unprecedented in its willingness to cater to racism, misogyny, and homophobia. They fear especially for the possible collapse of democratic freedoms, speech, travel, association, the press. My younger students especially think that the America they know and love is about to disappear. Rather than analyze matters soberly and listen to other people trying to sort things through, they often demonize an entire half of the American electorate, portraying them as monsters, excuse me, enemies of everything good. As in the book of Revelation, these are the last days when a righteous remnant must contend against satanic forces. We all need first to take a deep breath and recall our history. When I was a little girl, African Americans were being lynched in the South. Communists were losing their jobs. Women were just barely beginning to enter prestigious universities in the workforce, and sexual harassment was a ubiquitous offense that had no laws to deter it. Jews could not win partnerships in major law firms. Gays and lesbians, criminals under law, were almost always in the closet. People with disabilities had no rights in public space and public education. Transgender was a category that had as yet no name. America was far from beautiful. These facts tell us two things my students need to know. First, the America for which they are nostalgic never existed, not fully. It was a work in progress, a set of dynamic aspirations put in motion by tough work, cooperation, hope, and solidarity over a long period of time. A just and inclusive America never was, and is not yet a fully achieved reality. Second, this present moment may look like backsliding from our march toward human equality, but it's not the apocalypse, and it's actually a time when hope and work can accomplish a great deal of good. On both left and right, panic doesn't just exaggerate our dangers, it also makes our moment much more dangerous than it would otherwise be, more likely to lead to genuine disasters. It's like a bad marriage in which fear, suspicion, and blame displace careful thought about what the real problems are and how to resolve them. Instead, those emotions taking over become their own problem and prevent constructive work, hope, listening, and cooperation. When people are afraid of one another and of an unknown future, fear easily gives rise to scapegoating, to fantasies of payback, and to a poisonous envy of the fortunate, whether those victorious in the election or those dominant socially and economically. We all remember FDR's statement that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. We recently heard departing President Obama say, democracy can buckle when we give in to fear.
1 minute.
Roosevelt was wrong if we take his words literally. Although we had reason to fear fear, we certainly had many other things to fear in his time, such as Nazism, hunger, and social conflict. Fear of those evils was rational. And to that extent, we should not fear our fear, though we should always examine it. But Obama's more precise and modest statement is surely right. Giving way to fear, which means drifting with its currents, refusing skeptical examination, is surely dangerous. We need to think hard about fear and where fear is leading us. After taking a deep breath, we all need to understand ourselves as well as we can, using that moment of detachment to figure out where fear and related emotions come from and where they are leading us. But you might not be concerned so far that fear is really a deep problem for democratic self-government. And then she goes into a dialogue about that. The Monarchy of Fear by Martha Nussbaum.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, 34 minutes past the hour. And let's pick up some of your phone calls here. Warren in Missouri City, Texas. Hey, Warren, what's on your mind?
Hello, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. First off, I'd like to thank you for taking care of my sanity, but also got to welcome you to the dark side from the last couple of days, as I think you're beginning to see how bad things can get.
Well, yes and no. Warren, I'm still an optimist, and I'm still very, very hopeful, and I actually think that our country has tremendous resiliency, even in the face of what's going on. But I also think that we've been whistling past the graveyard way too long. We're not having the conversations that we need to have about what happens if this really goes south, whether it's the climate or whether it's Donald Trump.
Yes, I agree completely. And down here, having the conversation is almost impossible.
Down in Texas?
People have just been, across the South. I have family from Alabama to here, and it's scary, the denial and the extremes they go to. Do you remember Jade Helm?
Jade Helm, yeah, the Operation Jade Helm. Oh, that was the military exercises that what's his name, the conspiracy guy, Alex Jones said, this is
practice for when they're going to lock us all up in the reconditioned Walmart FEMA detention camps. Do I have that right?
Yes, exactly. And they did a news story on this a couple of months ago locally here in Houston, and they pointed out that the governor spent millions of dollars activating the Texas National Guard to defend us from the U.S. Army.
Right. Because of the right-wing conspiracy theories. Yeah, it's amazing the stuff that's out there. It's just amazing. Yeah, Warren. But you wanted to talk about voter suppression too in the South?
Yeah, this has been going on a long time down here.
Yeah. Like since the beginning of the Republic.
Yes, especially since the Civil War.
Yeah.
The colonel always decided who won the elections, and we still kind of go with that no matter what information we get, which is what's so scary. The last governor's race, the polls going into the race showed, because the Republicans had actually selected, like the guy who sent out the National Guard to fight the Army, were nuts.
Yeah.
And these guys were way off the fringe.
Yep.
And the Democrats were polling within a point or two. The exit polls came out, and the Democrats polled actually a point or two ahead. Guess what all the results were?
From the voting machines?
Yeah. From the voting machines, 60-40. Every Republican in the state office won.
Wow.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, we need to clean up our election systems. And what this means, Warren, is not that we should throw our hands up in the air and go, screw it. The system's rigged. It means that, if they're going to steal an election by 5 points, we need to show up by 10 points. It's just that simple. Overwhelming numbers. Warren, I need to move along, but thank you for the call. And thanks for that spooky bit of information there. Kevin in Queens, New York. Hey, Kevin, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Regards to the colorful caller you had earlier, I'm concerned about the Democratic Party too, but in the exact opposite direction.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to talk about climate change in the sense that you brought up that the Arab Spring happened is because of climate change.
Yes.
I wanted to add to the conversation about when we're going to start fighting for fresh water.
It's already happening.
I think that's going to be the next big thing.
Yeah, it's already happening. Water wars are happening across the southern part of the Asian continent. Water wars they're not wars yet, but they're conflicts. They're happening in the American Southwest, and it's going to get a whole heck of a lot worse. But you're right. The loss of fresh water is huge, and the contamination of aquifers. Now, we had a caller a couple days ago who I think was calling from Arizona, who said that they've got an aquifer in Arizona that's supplying Phoenix, and now the fracking companies want to frack right through the aquifer into the gas that's below it. Brilliant stuff. Kevin, thank you for the call. I'm saying that sarcastically. I mean, the brilliant stuff. I thank you for the call. I actually thank Kevin for the call. It was an excellent call. Nicholas in San Cristobal, Mexico. Hey, Nicholas, what's up?
Tom, how are you?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
Wanted to talk, or not talk, you're doing a terrific job, by the way. Thank you for the general subject of climate change. It's so incredibly important. Very quickly, do you know about a channel on YouTube called Collapse Chronicles?
No, but I'm familiar with Mike Ruppert's, or Rupert, I guess is how he says it, his movie Collapse. I watched that years ago. He passed away a few years ago, committed suicide. But
there's a fairly new channel. It's called Collapse Chronicles, but it's a series of interviews with some really genuinely brainiacal climatologists around the world. The first person I listened to was Paul Ehrlich. You remember the population?
Oh, I remember Paul well. I've interviewed Paul a number of times.
Yeah, what a terrific guy. Well, he's done an update on that and admits that he had missed what was later called the Green Revolution, the production of food, but via fossil fuel fertilizers and things like Roundup and, Monsanto, all that nonsense. So he's still sticking to the original population. He predicts within 25 to 30 years an outright Mad Max scenario. And this is a man who's not prone to hyperbole, right?
Yeah. So, I'm not willing to discard that as a possibility, but I still think that we are within the envelope where we can bend this curve. I realize I'm mangling metaphors here, but if we reach the point where we can't say that anymore,
then we have to have another conversation about, okay, how are we going to deal with the possibility that a large human die-off and what that's going to do for culture and society and the planet, and the future of the human race, and all these things.
And the morals of it all will be astonishingly difficult and complicated. The other thing I wanted to mention quickly was wars around the world, whether they be in the Sudan, whether they be in Somalia. The fact that the Syrian civil wars, if we can call them civil wars, followed directly on the heels of the 6-year worst drought in Syria's history. These things are not coincidences.
No, they're not.
And all that the climate dislocation has brought the world, and immigration to and into Europe. The whole thing is so incredibly complicated. Thank you for this conversation. This is so, so important.
You're welcome, Nicholas. Thank you for the call, and thanks for watching us there in Mexico. Let's see here. Mike in South Florida. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind? Sounds like you're driving, Mike.
Hello?
Yeah, you're on the air.
Hey, I wanted to talk to you. I'm sorry, let me take you off speakerphone. Hold on 1 second.
Well, if you're driving, don't do that. That's fine.
You can hear me?
Yeah, it's fine. What's up?
Okay, sorry. I used to live in Florida, South Florida. They drained the swamps in South Florida off of Lake Okeechobee, and they ran canals onto the East Coast and to the West Coast, and they started putting up sugar plantations.
Who is they?
I don't know, 40. Well, Big Sugar. So there's a whole bunch of sugar plantations in South Florida that all the runoff, all the fertilizer and stuff like that ends up into the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic, and that's where a lot of the red tides, red algae is coming from. Yeah. And since Florida's become real suburban, a lot of the homes that use fertilizer and pesticides and herbicides, they all wash off into the lakes, into the ponds, and the ponds and lakes get red algae blooms, red tides.
Right, and then you combine that burst of nutrients with a burst in temperature, and of course, the warmer things are, the more rapid, both biological and chemical processes move, and boom, you've got yourself an algal bloom. Spot on. Thank you very much for that, Mike.
Can I say one more thing real quick?
Yeah,
Tom?
sure.
The Naples Daily News ran a series about 10 years ago about the Gulf of Mexico and the climate change, and it was like one section every week, and it was amazing, really amazing. It went against the fossil fuel companies, the fracking, everything. It was really wild.
Wow. Whatever happened with that?
Yeah. Nothing, but it was sort of like the newspaper letting people know what's really going on.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting.
Wake up, people.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mike. Good to talk with you. Russ in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Russ, thanks for listening to X-Ray FM. What's up?
Well, I just wanted to give a shout out to all my fellow senior citizens, especially those who voted for Donald in 2016. Who, as you may recall, and it's on tape many, many times, he promised no cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, or Social Security. Right. Well, I did a little research, and according to PolitiFact, which I think is a pretty reputable outfit.
Yeah, it's run by the Washington Post.
Pardon?
It's owned by the Washington Post, I believe. So, yeah, they're solid.
Well, anyway, I think they're pretty reliable. And according to PolitiFact, Trump has proposed to cut $1 trillion from Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. Wonder of wonders, he lied.
Yeah.
And if you want it, Medicare in particular, I'm talking to the senior citizens now. It saved my life in 2015 when I had my cancerous prostate gland removed by an excellent surgeon here in Portland. And between between Medicare and my Medigap policy with USAA, I paid $80 for one blood test that Medicare wouldn't cover for some bureaucratic reason. But and that operation cost well over $100,000. I mean, this stuff is expensive. It saved my life, no doubt about it. And if the seniors out there, if they want to live, they better vote for a Democrat this fall because, the Democrats will protect these programs.
And the Republicans are coming after them. I mean, this whole thing of let's drive up $1 trillion deficit. Keep in mind when Obama left office, we had a budget surplus. When Clinton left office, we had a budget surplus, and when Carter left office, we had a budget surplus. But what they're trying to do is create this $1 trillion deficit so they can say, oh my God, we don't have any money. We can't afford to pay for Social Security and Medicare. Spot on, Russ. Thanks a lot for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We're going to check in with Luke Vargas and talk media news in about 4 minutes, find out what's going on in the world, and we'll continue with your calls and more of the news of the day. Greg Palast is going to do it at the top of the hour. And welcome back. Irene in New York City watching us on Free Speech TV. Hey, Irene, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call.
My pleasure.
I know sort of the topic is kind of a climate change specific today, but I think there's another topic. You're the caller who just called in about deficits and shortfalls. Front page of the New York Times, Treasury weighs $100 billion cut in taxes for the rich.
Yep.
Has to do with the capital gains.
Yep, I mentioned that in passing in the first hour, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I tuned in late. This is on top of the huge giveaway to the very rich that they just did a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And who's going to make up the shortfall, you know? And as your previous caller said, I just went on Social Security and Medicare last year. You know, I live on Social Security in New York City, which, let me tell you, requires juggling.
Yeah.
But I paid into it since I was 16 years old. I'm 67 now, and I just started taking it. Mm-hmm. So I'm not like a freeloader. But they're going to try to come and get it so that multimillionaire Mr. Mnuchin can give more money to people who are already so rich and powerful. We are not we the people anymore, Tom.
Yeah.
This is a government for oligarchs.
Yeah, and it's a government that's been captured by oligarchs. When you've got 70% of Republicans saying that Citizens United should be rolled back so that the oligarchs can't have the kind of political influence that they have, and yet you have a president proposing a Supreme Court nominee who thinks that Citizens United maybe didn't even go far enough. You know that you have a disconnect between the type of government you have and the kind of government that the people want. And that should be so obvious and so apparent. And the problem, of course, is that not only about half of us who are eligible to vote show up to vote.
Well, that was what I was going to mention to you, because you had mentioned voter turnout. I know many people. They're bright, they're educated. They never vote.
Yeah.
I don't understand the disconnect.
Yeah. Well, I think that for many people, the stakes were not viewed as being quite as high. They actually were, because this didn't just happen in a vacuum. This is a process that began in 1972 with the Powell memo and Lewis Powell being put on the Supreme Court by Richard Nixon, and then went on overdrive during the Reagan years and has just continuously been going up since. But I think that a lot of people thought, Nixon might have been a crook, but he wasn't a terrible president, and it's like George W. Bush. He wasn't, and they just didn't get the stakes. I think this is kind of the blessing of Trump, as much as it makes me cringe to say it, that people are now realizing what the stakes are. They're realizing that the rule of law is at risk. They're realizing our environment is at risk. They're realizing our retirements are at risk. They're realizing that our children are at risk. They're realizing that the stability of our nation, frankly, the stability of the entire planet when you throw in climate change, are all at risk. And the Republican Party and Donald Trump are not moving us in the direction that will ameliorate any of those concerns. And in fact, they're doing the opposite. They're putting forward policies that are going to make things worse. So. Oh,
you're absolutely right, Tom. The Republican Party isn't even a party. I don't recognize who they are.
Yeah, no, it's a coalition of predators and hustlers.
They're a cult. They are a cult.
Yeah, it's a cult. That's a good one. So, well said. Irene, thank you very much for the call, and thanks for watching us there in New York. We'll be right back with Luke Vargas with Talk Media News. Stick around. Oh, hi. I was just meditating, listening to the sounds of the ocean from this app, from my brainwaves that are being detected by the Muse headband. To find out more about it, check out choosemuse.com, code TOM. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beats.
More information is available over at thomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The new X chair, it's the X3, is just such a big upgrade from even the old X chair, which I think was one of the very best chairs, if not the best chair, office chair on the market. Check it out at xchairtom, T-H-O-M, xchairtom.com. Cameron Hughes travels the world looking for the finest wines and then bottles them in this lot way so that you can save an enormous amount of money. Last night, Louise and I had the 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley. It was extraordinary. You can learn more at chwine.com/Tom.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Alan Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. Online with us is the chief foreign correspondent for Talk Media News, based out of the UN in New York, Luke Vargas. You can follow Luke on Twitter at The Courier. Luke, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tom.
So let's see here. Iran and North Korea, the two possible war-based flashpoints right now. Iran is saying, we really don't have any interest in meeting with you, Mr. Trump. And North Korea is apparently going ahead with their missile production. To what extent, and Trump is increasingly, I think we're all figuring out that Trump actually has this strategy, and it would be fascinating. In fact, maybe we should try and get Tony Schwartz on, Sean, to find out if this was a strategy that he learned in his business days of basically trashing the person that you're negotiating with, intimidating the person you're negotiating with, and then being very, very nice to them. What's going on here, Luke, and what's the status of these two situations?
I mean, I think it's pretty clear, and many of the Iranian experts I talked to this morning seem to back this up, saying that Trump is trying to replicate his North Korea strategy with the Iranians, but just because both of these countries have supreme leaders, Iran is very much more complex politically, and the Trump strategy doesn't seem to take that into account. That Trump has been ping-ponging back and forth in extreme ways over the last 10 days or so, between threatening the Iranians to then saying, hey, I'm open to talks without preconditions, and then going back to threats. And that is too inconsistent for the Iranian political system to be able to absorb right now. And most of the experts I talked to said, look, this was even before the announcement came from the Iranian foreign ministry that they would view it as a humiliation and worthless to meet with President Trump this morning. These folks were saying that we don't think this is going to happen. That you've actually seen Rouhani over the last month or so, but particularly, and even a little bit further back, going back to the U.S. actually withdrawing from the nuclear deal, that, Rouhani, who for so long had expended political capital to defy Iranian hardliners and say it was worth it to take a gamble on American trustworthiness, something the Ayatollah in that country also sort of gave his blessing to at the time, several years ago, that in recent months he's pivoted. He's begun to try and, try and build up his support from hardliners in Iran. He has switched to the language of threats directed at the United States. He's threatened to shut down the Straits of Hormuz, and he wants the support of those hardliners. And so it's been described to me as sort of a political suicide should he reverse course again and put Iran's future on the line in the hopes that the U.S. is going to play nicely when they've shown plenty of willingness that we don't want to play nicely. So not perhaps much of a surprise that they've turned down the offer today. And the Iranians, again, do seem to be backing up the strategy you talked about, saying that, hey, look, Trump likes meeting for the sake of meetings, but there's just nothing that we could really gain from this. The priority in Iran right now is to go not to the United States and hope for some sort of touchdown deal that changes their fortune, but better to work with partners in Europe and the Chinese and the Russians, who are still part of the Iran nuclear deal, and try to get those much more trustworthy negotiating partners to give assurances about how, these sanctions are or are not going to snap back against Iran.
In December, right?
Those are the countries to negotiate with. I think it's November for the oil export sanctions. Actually, some sanctions against Iran kick into effect on the 6th of August, but those are just U.S. ones. So Iran cares much more about dealing with the Europeans, who they think are more level-headed negotiators, than about staking betting high.
Right. And then the weapon that Trump has is that he can say to Volkswagen or Siemens or any kind of European company, if you continue doing business with Iran, you will not be allowed to do business with the United States, or you're going to see tariffs or penalties or whatever. And that has a lot of these companies in Europe freaked out. In fact, a number of them have pulled out of Iran already. And it's got the Iranians freaked out because they were building an economy based on trade with Europe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also think a really important thing to keep in mind here is it's not, if you sort of look at it and try to draw parallels with the North Korean negotiations, there's not quite as many bits of diplomatic low-hanging fruit for the U.S. and Iran to deal with. There are Iranian Americans who are in prisons in Iran. That might be a priority for Trump, but I don't think we have seen quite as much sensitivity to their plight in this administration than we had about the North Korean captives. There are some other sort of secondary issues. We may be trying to push the Iranians to encourage troops that they might be supporting in Syria to back away from Israel, but is that enough of a priority for the U.S. to go into these negotiations with Iran directly to address? I think that's unlikely. So again, we don't see quite as sort of easy victories for the president here in going into these negotiations.
Well, is he going to have an easy victory if it's proven to be true that North Korea is actually accelerating their production of nuclear weapons and delivery vehicles?
Well, now you bring us into a whole other area where we have seen North Korea doing everything it can to stonewall the United States. Even, bringing back those 55 American remains was pretty puny effort, I think, on their part, and it took them a long time to do it. And I'll just toss out in our final seconds, The Economist now reporting that in the meetings between Kim Jong-un and Xi Jinping after the Singapore summit, the Chinese have agreed to spend up to about $100 million on improving infrastructure within North Korea. So the sanctions pressure, to put it mildly, from the Chinese is certainly coming off right now.
Wow. So North Korea, so basically Kim gets whatever he wants, and Trump is standing outside. The emperor truly has no clothes here. Luke, thank you so much.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Yep, good talking with you. Luke Vargas, The Courier on Twitter. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
Oh, hi. I was just meditating, listening to the sounds of the ocean from this app, from my brainwaves that are being detected by the Muse headband. To find out more about it, check out choosemuse.com, code TOM. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Superbeats. More information is available over at tomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The new X chair, it's the X3, is just such a big upgrade from even the old X chair, which I think was one of the very best chairs, if not the best chair, office chair on the market. Check it out at xchairtom, THOM, xchairtom.com. Cameron Hughes travels the world looking for the finest wines and then bottles them in this lot way so that you can save an enormous amount of money. Last night, Louise and I had the 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley. It was extraordinary. You can learn more at chwine.com/Tom.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Meat Racket, The Secret Takeover of America's Food Business by Christopher Leonard. This is from the prologue. It's titled The Hidden King. Nobody ever visits the stranded little community of Waldron, Arkansas. But even if they did, a tourist would never see the place for what it really is. Most outsiders would be fooled into thinking it was an actual small town. On any given morning, the residents awaken and begin their routine along Main Street. Old men park their pickup trucks by the curb in front of the Rock Cafe, which opens early for breakfast. As the cafe's booths and tables fill up, a congregation of old-timers in cowboy hats gathers in a loose ring of aluminum chairs out front, smoking and talking and stubbing out their cigarette butts in a bucket full of sand. Later in the morning, Chambers Bank in the south end of town opens up, and the tellers cheerfully greet customers by name. On Thursday at noon, the livestock auction opens in a cavernous barn on the north side of town, drawing crowds of ranchers who haul steel trailers behind their trucks, with cows staring out between the horizontal slats. In the late afternoon, teenagers park their cars by the gazebo south of the auction barn, proudly displaying their Mustangs and Broncos like big game trophies. These events have a rhythm of their own, the clockwork functioning of a small-town economy. But it's all just window dressing. All of it would cease to exist in a moment and have no impact whatsoever on the true Waldron or its true economic reason for being. The real tempo of the town's economic pulse is measured by the coming and going of semi-trucks that roll down Main Street at periodic intervals, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the middle of the night, tanker trucks full of animal feed rumble past the empty stores and out onto country roads that lead into the hilly terrain that surrounds town. At dawn, other trucks trundle in from the hills, heaped high with battered metal crates full of chickens that exude clouds of white feathers along the highway. The tempo can be measured in the regular arrival of train cars full of grain and oil seeds that dump their loads at a feed mill that clanks and hums and churns all night. And in the parade of refrigerated trucks that pull up to a slaughterhouse near the feed mill and get loaded with pallets of frozen meat. This is the real functioning of Waldron, Arkansas, and its true reason for being. This is the heartbeat of Tyson Foods, the nation's biggest meat company. The Tyson plant on the north end of Waldron is the only thing that keeps the town on the map. Appropriately, many residents simply refer to it as the complex. That's because the Tyson plant isn't just a factory, it's more like an entire small-town economy consolidated into one property. The complex contains its own feed mill and hatchery, its own trucking line and slaughterhouse that covers several acres of land and processes about 1 million dead chickens a week. The complex is like an economic dark star that has drawn into itself all the independent businesses, an economic dark star that has drawn into itself all the independent businesses that used to define a small town like Waldron, the kinds of businesses that were once the economic pillars of rural America. Of course, tourists to Waldron would never see the Tyson plant, and not just because it sits on the north fringe of town away from Main Street. Visitors are stopped at its front gate and forbidden from exploring its grounds. So a tourist would have to be content to stroll along the sidewalks downtown, observing the fake Main Street, the deceptive array of little businesses that make it seem like a community. This illusory appearance cloaks Tyson's existence all the way from its roots in rural America to the grocery store shelves and restaurant menus where its products finally reach American consumers. The average shopper is usually fooled when he or she peruses the meat aisle, seeing what appears to be an abundance of choices and products. Tyson brand name wouldn't necessarily stand out with its logo gracing just a handful of products. But the rotisserie chicken slowly turning in its oven, the Bonisi brand pepperoni, the Lady Astor brand chicken cordon bleu, the frozen chicken pot pie, and the Wright brand bacon all come from the same company, Tyson. And then there is all the unlabeled meat that Tyson floods into the U.S. food system every day. The meat served in cafeterias, nursing homes, fast food restaurants, and suburban eateries where more and more Americans eat their meals. There's a very good chance any of the meat purchased in these places was made by Tyson. Even if Tyson did not produce a given piece of meat, the consumer is really only picking between different versions of the same commodified beef, chicken, and pork that is produced throughout a system that Tyson pioneered. Tyson's few competitors have resorted to imitating the company's business model just to survive. This book aims to explore the vast hidden territory between the remote farms and towns like Waldron, where Tyson raises millions of animals, and the final point of contact where consumers buy the company's meat. Unseen between these two poles is a hidden power structure that has quietly reshaped U.S. rural economies while gaining unprecedented control over the nation's meat supply. Just a handful of companies produce nearly all the meat consumed in the United States, and Tyson is the king among them. The company sits atop a powerful oligarchy of corporations that determines how animals are raised, how much farmers get paid, and how meat is processed, all while reaping massive profits and remaining almost entirely opaque to the consumer. Because Tyson and its imitators are based in the geographic and economic fringes of America in forgotten places like Waldron, the company has managed to escape the scrutiny it deserves. While Tyson's operations are remote, the company's business practices affect virtually everyone. About 95% of Americans eat chicken, which means they almost certainly eat chicken produced by Tyson. And then it goes on from there. The book is The Meat Racket, The Secret Takeover of America's Food Industry by Christopher Leonard.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So Brian Kemp won the Republican primary down in Georgia. I lived in Georgia. Louise and I lived in Georgia for a little over a decade. Lived in Atlanta and Roswell and Marietta. And I never saw people fleeing the state. It always looked to me like people were coming into Georgia. But Brian Kemp removed 591,548 people from the voting rolls last year, over 500,000. What the heck is going on down in Georgia? Greg Palast is on the line with us, our old friend, the investigative reporter. Let's see, what's the latest you're up to here, Greg? The best democracy money can buy, gregpalast.com. And you can tweet at Greg_Palast. Greg, welcome back.
Glad to be with you, Tom.
So what's the deal here? We've got the guy who's now running on the Republican ticket for governor of Georgia against Stacey Abrams, this brilliant Democrat. The guy who's running against her last year pulled almost 600,000 people off the voting rolls of Georgia. I'm real familiar with that state. 500,000 people did not leave the state of Georgia last year.
Yeah, I was just down in Georgia, and I didn't see this mass evacuation going on. But what's happened here is Brian Kemp is the Secretary of State, and I know this is only supposed to happen in Russia, but he's the Secretary of State. He's also in charge of the voting there and running for governor against Stacey Abrams. He just won the Republican primary, Brian Kemp. He removed 591,000 people on the grounds that they had left Georgia. Okay, and this is the new purge method of purging voters. Now, you have to understand, no, 500,000 people did not leave Georgia.
Yeah, I was going to say, where are the FEMA camps? I mean, I don't get it.
Yeah, right. Okay, so what's happened is, and by the way, it's not just any people. He removed people named James Brown, named Maria Hernandez, named David Kim. What's going on here? Well, there are two things. Number one, remember our old friend Crosscheck, created by Chris Kobach of Kansas, Mr. KKK, they go by his initials, and the Crosscheck program has now been transformed. Instead of accusing people of voting twice, they simply say, oh, they've moved, they've left the state. Right. So Maria Inez Hernandez, that's a real voter in Georgia, supposed to have moved to Louisiana because there's a voter there named Maria Hernandez. Maria Cristina Hernandez, they say it's the same voter who's moved out of the state. It's the new use of cross-check. About 500,000 people were identified that way. Then they got a postcard. It's called Purge by Postcard. Just because you're on Chris Kobach's list does not remove your name. It gets you a postcard. 80% of people don't return the postcard that says, please confirm you are who you are. It's a very goofy kind of piece of junk mail.
Right.
So most people throw it away. You throw it away, you've thrown your vote away. They also say if you skipped a couple elections, you didn't vote, and their records are horrible, but if they say you didn't vote for a couple elections, you get another postcard.
And in a 5-4 decision, the right-wingers on the Supreme Court, in the case of the state of Ohio doing this, said, this is just fine with us.
Yes, so what happened is that the system, which was used in Ohio by the right-wing Secretary of State, used in Georgia by the right-wing Secretary of State, created by Chris Kobach. They said if you don't vote, that's evidence that you have moved, which is kind of odd. They send you a postcard. If the postcard does not come back, and remember, if a postcard, Tom, is delivered to you, instead of going back to the state saying, addressee unknown, moved, whatever, if it gets to you, that usually is evidence that you haven't moved anywhere. So this and by the way, the most important thing to know is that the lists used, both the people who supposedly skipped voting, the people who didn't return the postcards, the people on the cross-check list, overwhelmingly voters of color. For example, just because you're homeless doesn't mean you're voteless. You get to vote. They send these postcards to homeless shelters where people are registered. They're legitimate voters. If they don't get their card, they lose their vote. They send them to soldiers that go overseas. They don't get their card, they don't vote. Remember, we have a heavily minority military. Students. I know one student. My daughter tried to vote in Georgia. Good luck. If you're moving your dorm room, they say you've left the state. You're not a resident here anymore.
You mean like moving from one building to another sort of thing?
Yeah, and moving within an apartment building, moving within a congressional district down the block. A lot of, again, who moves constantly? Who's itinerant, as they would say? That's
young
people, young people, people of color, renters, as opposed to homeowners. An older suburban white homeowner is 900% more likely to return this postcard than a young voter of color that's a renter or in a dorm room.
Sure.
So it's a racial purge system. It's 591,000 voters, and Stacey Abrams herself looked at the list and said, "My God," because she hadn't seen the list. It's being kept secret. She said, "Look at this. They're removing voters who've moved, but dig this. They've moved into the state." Stacey Abrams herself did that analysis of the list for me. She is the minority leader of the House, an African-American woman running historically for governor. And so what we're doing about it with the Reverend Jesse Jackson, with the Reverend Joseph Lowry's organization, Helen Butler, great voting rights advocate in Atlanta, we've put Brian Kemp as Secretary of State, wants to be governor, on notice that we're going to sue him in federal court under the National Voter Registration Act for violating the voting rights of 500,000 Georgians just so he can elect himself governor. He will be sued. We put him on 90-day notice. He's got about 35 days left to give us the names of the people he has removed, because we're going to put them back on. And we're suing him in federal court if he doesn't cough up the list of the purged.
Are you optimistic that this legal tactic of yours might actually work? And if so, why is the Democratic Party doing this in every single state controlled by Republican secretaries of state who have been on this binge? I mean, they've purged millions of people from the voting rolls in the last few years.
Well, we filed notices of lawsuits in 26 states. Almost all of these are Republican officials purging like there's no tomorrow. And there is no tomorrow for Republicans if they don't get these voters of color off the voter rolls and the young people off the voter rolls. We have had zero help from the Democratic Party, but it's been voter rights organizations, Hispanic groups in Arizona and the great John Brakey, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, Illinois, the Reverend Joseph Lowry's organization in Atlanta, Gary Flowers, the great voting rights advocate out of Virginia. But, I'm not waiting for the Democratic Party to save our rights. We have to save our own voting rights. Go to gregpalast.com if you want to participate in this historic lawsuit against the guys who are making historic, bonfires out of the voter rolls.
Yeah, this is breathtaking. How just in our face these guys have gotten. It's got to be that they're desperate. It's got to be that they're flailing around the edges. Greg, I'm curious your thoughts on the. There was an article over on the Root last week, and we had somebody call in about it. I checked it out, and the author was talking about how the exit polls in numerous states showed Clinton winning, but the voting machines showed Trump winning. And that might be because of purges. People were given provisional ballots, or it might be because the machines were actually hacked. But that article has been taken down. The publisher said there might be some inaccuracies, and I don't know where those inaccuracies are. Do you know anything about that?
I do know a lot about that. It's called the odd red shift. Okay, you have exit polls, which is how the United States State Department determines if an election in a foreign country, in Ukraine, in Peru, in the Balkans, that's how we determine if an election is honest, if the exit polls match the ultimate decision. Well, the exit polls showed Hillary Clinton won. What happened in certain states including Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. What happened is that, for the most part, it's people who were purged. We had ready 2.7 million provisional ballots, which people were handed because their names are not on the voter rolls. 2.7 million provisional ballots were not counted.
In those 3 states?
Yeah, no, 2.7 million
nationwide.
throughout the nation.
Okay.
We had 75,300 votes, for example, not counted in Michigan, and Trump only won by 10,700. Almost every one of those uncounted votes were broken down machines in Detroit and Flint. The machines that read, they're paper ballots, but they're read by machines. The machines broke down and didn't switch it's not like some guy pulled a switch and switched the votes from Clinton to Trump. They simply didn't count the votes in Detroit. They didn't count votes in Milwaukee. They didn't count votes in Madison, where students are. Milwaukee's an African-American city. We had tremendous problems in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania and throughout the nation. And it goes back, and you're going to see this, what I'm really afraid of in Georgia. Georgia has just become the Deep South first minority majority state because you've had this massive influx, especially the Asian American community, which has been a particular, by the way, Jack Kemp's particular target is to go after the Asian American community, which has come in. There's kind of like
you mean Brian Kemp
highway. And because Asian Americans vote like they've turned black. About 75% of Asian Americans vote Democratic now, and that scares the hell out of Brian Kemp. He cannot win if Asian American voters are allowed to vote, and he knows that. And certainly students and black voters and Hispanic voters, another growing population in Georgia.
So if you're going to do a purge that will sweep up those subpopulations or those ethnic populations, whatever the proper demographic word is, you do it by looking for common names.
Common names, because 85 of the 100 most common names in the United States are minority names, like Garcia, Rodriguez, Black, Johnson, Jackson, Kim, Wong. These are the common names of America, and this is the new America. This is what's most common in America are minority names. And so if you do things like check for literally the state of Georgia, Brian Kemp said there were 535 guys named James Brown who had moved to another state because believe it or not, they found a James Brown in Detroit and they found a James Brown in Virginia.
Greg, we're out of time, but Greg Palast, you can check it out at gregpalast.com if you want to participate in this effort. Greg, thanks. Keep up the great work.
You're the best, Tom. Thank you.
Thanks.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be right back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Elizabeth in West Hollywood, California. Hey, Elizabeth, what's on your mind today?
Hi. Well, originally I was going to talk to you about Trump. Trump going to close down the government because nobody had put up a wall, and I was going to suggest that we get a bunch of those Trump balloons and put them all along the border. And that'll be fair.
You mean the Trump in diapers balloons? Yeah, that would be a sight to see.
Yeah, but after listening to Greg Palast and all the other stuff before, you had somebody on the air about a week ago that was, speaking about terminology, the way you phrase something. Mm-hmm. And instead of calling Trump the president, because of all this conniving and manipulation of this voting, he should be called the alleged president because he didn't get the number of popular vote. Yeah. And the tax break should be called welfare for the rich because it's money they don't really need, is it?
Yep.
So it's just kind of an extra benefit.
Although that's kind of slurring welfare. I mean, I think we need to rehabilitate the word, but I'm not sure how else to do it. Subsidies for the rich, but yeah, I get your point. I absolutely get your point, Elizabeth.
Free money for the rich. Yeah. And I was just trying to think of some other ones, but if they come to me, I'll call you back.
Okay. Elizabeth, thanks a lot for the call. It's great to hear from you, and I love the balloon idea. That's a good one. Let's see here. Len in Pompano Beach, Florida. Hey, Len, what's up?
Hey, we were talking before about taxes, and I've had a proposal that people seem to like about taxes. Assuming we get control and we can reorganize the tax rates, we have a tax on 3 million or so above income as high as 65 or 70%. Everybody should get a credit for their state taxes paid. And the main reason for that would be that it would disincentivize states from not collecting taxes, because if they now taxed all of the individuals there at higher rates, or like California, then people wouldn't complain because they would have a credit for that tax paid on their federal, which would give states a lot of room to actually implement some of these states' rights ideas, like education.
This is the Trump's the Republican tax scam reversed that and made it, put a cap of $10,000 on the amount that you can deduct from your taxes if you live in a high tax state.
You can deduct up to 15% of that 65-70% in taxes. It's just that you'll be paying it to the state instead of the federal government.
Right.
And, there's no reason not to keep the capital gains tax either. It's just that the length of time you hold an investment should be closer to 5 years than 1 year and a day.
Yeah, and it used to be I think it used to be 5 or 10 years actually that you had to hold on to something for capital gains. But
it used to be a longer time.
Yeah.
So but the best thing about that is you wouldn't have North Carolina competing against Michigan, who's going to tax people lower.
Right.
Because everybody's taxes are going to be deductible. It won't matter to them if they're taxed.
Yeah. Interesting idea, Len. Thanks a lot for the call. And thanks for watching us on YouTube. We'll be back. It's 22 minutes past the hour. Oh, hi. I was just meditating, listening to the sounds of the ocean from this app, from my brainwaves that are being detected by the Muse headband. To find out more about it, check out choosemuse.com, code TOM. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Superbeats. More information is available over at tomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. The new X chair, it's the X3, is just such a big upgrade from even the old X chair, which I think was one of the very best chairs, if not the best chair, office chair on the market. Check it out at xchairtom, THOM, xchairtom.com. Cameron Hughes travels the world looking for the finest wines and then bottles them in this lot way so that you can save an enormous amount of money. Last night, Louise and I had the 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley. It was extraordinary. You can learn more at chwine.com/Tom.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Helping you win the water cooler wars, Thom Hartmann here with you. And Chacombe, am I saying that right? In Toppenish, Washington?
Chacombe in Toppenish, Washington.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. What's up?
I'm calling about Camp Cloud. I heard you guys talking about climate change, and there's an indigenous camp on the outskirts of Vancouver, British Columbia, that is under attack now more than ever for fighting this pipeline. And I just wanted to see if some of your listeners wanted to give some support to Camp Cloud, some words of encouragement or something on their Facebook. This is an indigenous camp. It's run by some of the Squamish people in tandem. It's also on the Tsleil-Waututh land and Musqueam land. There are people like Proud Boy groups that are also in Canada that are threatening to come and dismantle the camp, have been up to the camp threatening elders. And so, besides the government harassment, now there's white supremacy harassment. Wow. And so I just wanted to let your listeners know about that and see if they could.
How do people find out more information about this?
Get on Facebook and type in Camp Cloud or Google Camp Cloud.
Okay. Got it. Okay, cool.
They're fighting the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
Yeah, and this is the one that would bring the tar sands oil to the coast, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
grim stuff. Thank you so much for alerting us to that. I appreciate the call. Thank you. Mark in San Diego. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind?
Yeah, it's fine if you.
Okay. Hey, Tom. I was the guy that called last Friday to give you the heads up on that Root article.
Yeah.
And I was very distressed to hear that during your interview with Greg Palast that you said it was pulled down because of some inaccuracies. I can't imagine what those inaccuracies could possibly have been.
That's got me baffled too. But if you go to the Root website, you'll see that article, the headline is still there, and then there's just a little paragraph that says from the editors that we've taken this article down because it contains some inaccuracies and we're waiting for the author to correct them.
Yeah, well, I don't know what that's all about, but anyway, it was great to hear you interview Greg Palast. I think it's ironic that you mentioned Georgia because I think that's the state where all this red surge began back in 2002 when the governor and the Senate were big upsets. I guess both the Democrats were favored to win, and they installed the deal ball machines, and lo and behold, the Republicans do like an 8-9 point turnaround, and it's been. Honestly, they're saying now that the exit polls are not reliable. Well, if that were the case, wouldn't once in a while the exit polls show a Republican winning and then end up losing? I mean, just the law of averages, right? But
the exit polls in those states that are not contested, basically, actually are reliable. The exit polls in Wyoming are reliable. The exit polls in Montana are reliable. But the exit polls in Georgia, not so much. The exit polls in Pennsylvania, definitely not. Those exit polls show Democrats winning over and over and over again, but the actual, output from the voting machines shows no, Republicans always won. And it's partly, it might be the unreliability of the voting machines, but I think that the larger factor here is the one that Greg Palast has identified, which is right in front of us and doesn't require any kind of weird conspiracy theory. And that is that that people are being given provisional ballots. They're told, hey, you're not on the voting list, so here, you vote on this provisional ballot. Well, provisional ballots don't get counted. So people tell the exit poller that they voted, but it didn't get counted. Thanks, Mark, for the call. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Talk media for the rest of us right after this.
Our book today is The Poisoned City, Flint's Water and the American Urban Tragedy by Anna Clark. This is from the prologue. On a hot day in the summer of 2014 in the Civic Park neighborhood where Pastor R. Sherman McCathern preached in Flint, Michigan, water rushed out of a couple of fire hydrants. Puddles formed on the dry grass and splashed the skin of the delighted kids who ran through it. But the spray looked strange. The water was coming out dark as coffee for hours, McCathern remembered. The shock of it caught in his throat. Something is wrong here. Something had been wrong for months. That spring, Flint, under the direction of state officials, turned off the darkening water that it had relied on for the drinking water that it had relied on for nearly 50 years. The city planned to join a new regional system called the Carignan Water Authority, and while it waited for the KWA to be built, it began bringing in its water from the Flint River. McCathern didn't pay much attention to the politicking around all this. He had enough to worry about with his busy parish. But after the switch, many of his neighbors grew alarmed at the water that flowed from their kitchen faucets and shower heads. They packed public meetings, wrote questioning letters, and protested at City Hall. They filled clear plastic bottles in their taps to show how the water looked brown or orange and sometimes had particulates floating in it. Showering seemed to be connected with skin rashes and hair loss. The water smelled foul. A sip of it put the taste of a cold metal coin on your tongue. But the authorities said everything was all right and you could drink it, so people did, McCathern said later. Residents were advised to run their faucets for a few minutes before using the water to get a clean flow. But as the months went by, the city plant tinkered with treatment and issued a few boil water advisories. State environmental officials said again and again that there was nothing to worry about. The water was just fine. Whatever their senses told them, whatever the whispers around town, whatever Flint's troubled history with powerful institutions telling them what was best for them, this wasn't actually hard for people like McCathern to believe. Public water systems are one of this country's most heroic accomplishments, a feat so successful that it's almost invisible. By making it a commonplace for clean water to be delivered to homes, businesses, and schools, we have saved untold lives from what today sound like antiquated diseases in a Charles Dickens novel: cholera, dysentery, typhoid fever. Here in Flint, it was instrumental in turning General Motors, founded in 1908 in Vehicle City, as the town was known, into a global economic giant. The advancing underground network of pipes defined the growing city and its metropolitan region, which boasted of being home to one of the strongest middle classes in the entire United States. McCathern is a tall, bald man with a thin mustache and a scratchy rasp in his baritone voice. At the time of the water switch, he had led the non-denominational Joy Tabernacle Church for about 15 years. It was founded in the YMCA in downtown Flint, where it held baptisms in the swimming pool. But in 2009, it made a home in Civic Park, where a Presbyterian church closed after 85 years and gave its sanctuary over to the young and hopeful congregation. By then, Civic Park, one of America's oldest subdivisions, was a desert of deserted, historically significant homes, the pastor said. Built between 1917 and 1919 by General Motors and DuPont and Company, along curving tree-lined boulevards, the tidy houses were designed for Flint's auto workers and their families. But over the years, the neighborhood was blighted by vacancy. Empty 2 stories with lurching front porches and crumbling roofs sat alongside crisply painted homes where Flint residents, they sometimes call themselves Flintoids or Flintstones, still live their lives. When the sound of gunshots on the street outside interrupted services, McCathern gave a nod to the church musicians, urging them to play louder. Some called Joy Tabernacle a thug church, he said, but McCathern saw the good. The young men filling his pews built a proud society, if not by getting their names on the honor roll, then by tagging their names with spray paint. In the end, people just want to be seen. The ghosts of the past went well beyond Civic Park. Between General Motors and the United Auto Workers, the city had been a flourishing hub for American innovation. There were more than 100 different manufacturing establishments in town. 10 of them employed at least 1,000 people each. And they not only made automobiles, but paints, varnishes, tools, dyes, cotton, textiles, and a wealth of other products. Flint had one of the highest per capita incomes in the entire nation. And despite being severely segregated, it was a magnet for African-American migrants from the South. When Vice President Hubert Humphrey stopped by during the campaign for the 1964 presidential election, he praised Flint for, quote, zooming ahead with unbelievable growth and progress. Workers earned wages that are very good, Humphrey said, and, quote, because of the great labor management program in the community over many years, there has been a constant rise in the standard of living, end quote. Away from the assembly lines and the executive suites, the people of Flint felt that the city just shouldn't be a place to work. It should also be a place to thrive. Charles Stewart Mott, an auto pioneer who became GM's single largest stockholder and 3-term mayor, created a nationally renowned community schools program that provided education, skills building workshops, and social influence and social services. The book, The Poison City.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and wow, there's a lot going on right now. Carl in Chicago. Hey, Carl, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I just wanted to give you a footnote on the Bush-Iraq war.
Mm-hmm.
After the war, you probably heard this. I don't know. I've never heard it discussed. After the war was over, the Bush family, supposedly Jenna Bush, purchased 100,000 acres of land in Paraguay. There is no extradition as we speak for political refugees that live in Paraguay.
I am aware of that, of both those facts. And when I first heard that, and this was back, in what, 2009, 2010, that story broke, I thought, this is nuts, and the Bush family said, no, this is just part of our investment portfolio. or something like that. But yeah,
supposedly Jenna Bush. But
yeah.
Can I say one other thing about
sure.
what you're doing and keep doing it? You're doing a great job. The one bright spot that I like to look at is the car company Tesla. Tesla has basically exposed how many people in this country are willing to help to protect the environment by ordering Tesla cars, and the amount of money that the Tesla stock is worth right now is phenomenal, only because there are people out there that are concerned with the environment if they're only given a chance to do something, and they did. They back ordered Tesla cars with zero advertising, zero advertising for the public, but still there's so many people that are on a waiting list to get Tesla cars because they're willing to do it, and a lot of them are doing it because to help the environment.
And it's not just Tesla. I just bought a plug-in hybrid that's a Toyota. Honda is making a plug-in hybrid.
Right,
the Chevy Volt is a plug-in hybrid. Plus, there's all these 100% electric cars as well. It's moving in that direction, Carl, right across the board.
But the nice thing about Tesla was he open sourced all of his technology. He said any company that wants to see what we're doing, he open sourced it and said, take a look, you can do it too. So I like the fact that Tesla was basically willing to give everything to other companies so they can try to compete also.
Yeah, fascinating. Carl, thank you. Thanks for the info and for the tip and for the call. Tom in Joshua Tree, California. Hey, Tom, what's on your mind today?
Yes, thank you, Tom, for taking my call. I want to talk about policy law versus ballot law and the fragility that's found in policy law. And I want to use animal rights and particularly trapping as the example because of the few people who actually trap and the numbers of states that still allow it, yet the overwhelming population that supports animal protection and thinks that trapping is outdated, that it needs to go away. In a recent policy decision by the California Fish and Game Commission, we outlawed bobcat trapping for fur in California, and it took 3 years of really hard work by a lot of people to defeat something that was basically supporting 100 trappers statewide. The total fees the trappers were paying in trapping fees and tags and what have you covered approximately 5% of the actual administration costs, which meant that it was taxpayer subsidized.
Right.
And yet, at the whim of a governor, we could have a new Fish and Game Commission that could overturn this policy, and all of that work would go down the drain, and they could change the law back.
Yeah, the basic problem that you have, Tom, is that this is also the problem that people who are concerned about farm animals' rights are, with all the laws that are being passed in states around the country saying that if somebody comes and takes pictures of a factory farm, that they've committed a felony, they can go to jail for 10 and 15 years. The problem is that, everybody is ranking the things that they are freaked out about and the things that they're willing to fight for. And, by and large, human stuff tends to outrank animal stuff, except for a small subset of the population. And I'm all in favor of protecting animals. I've been a vegetarian since I was 16 years old. I mean, it's like, I'm all in favor of that. And I know that at the end of the day, if I've got to make a donation to a political cause or something, like that, probably protecting animals in factory farms or protecting wild animals from being trapped is lower on my list than stopping global warming or stopping thermonuclear war or preventing the Republican Party from continuing to corrupt our electoral process. So, I mean, that's just the raw, naked challenge. There's so many issues, and there's only so many resources, and there's only so many activists.
Yeah, well, I agree. I just see where the people who are being active in these efforts,
and God bless them. I mean, it's great stuff that they're doing, and there are some people who just feel such empathy with animals, and I know some of these folks, and I really honor the work that they're doing, that they're willing to put their lives on the line for it. But most people aren't. Most people are more, their first priority tends to be humans, and if you try to explain to them that the fate of animals is tied up in your fate, then the argument is starting to get, factory farming produces more greenhouse gas than cars do, for example. Then you're starting to get into the arguments that are, one level removed from where they can be emotional. And now it's starting to become intellectual, and that doesn't churn fundraising and things like that. But I get your point, Tom,
I guess really, Tom, I just want to say that I wish that the ballot measure direction is where these things could go.
Yeah.
That when we have such support statewide, that there would be something permanent.
Yes.
It wouldn't be at the whim of a pen coming from administration.
I agree, and hopefully those people who are working aggressively in these areas and they're fighting against the big companies, and particularly with the factory farms, they're fighting against billion-dollar operations who are trying to criminalize outing cruel and inhumane practices. Hopefully they can start getting these things carved into more meaningful and lasting laws than they've got so far. I think that they're winning the public opinion fight. But anyhow, thanks for the call, Tom. Tamara in Joplin, Missouri. How do you say your name? Tamara, what's up?
Well, I was calling to mention that Secretary of State in Georgia is following the playbook of Matt Blunt, who was Secretary of State here in Missouri in 2004, and I voted in the general in August, and by November I had been purged from the voter roll.
Wow.
And I let Brad Freeman know what happened here in Missouri, and he wrote a story that in 2004 Missouri was ground zero for this. Matt Blunt, as Secretary of State, deleted Democrats after the primary and became governor in November.
Wow. So what's happening in Georgia is just a replay of what happened in 2004 in Missouri. That's what you're saying?
Yes, it's the exact same game plan. Bring Brad Freeman on and he'll tell you all about it.
Yeah, I should do that. Thanks a lot for the call, Tamara. I appreciate it. It's great to hear from you. Ron in Buffalo, New York. Hey, Ron, what's up?
Yeah, first I want to thank you very much for pushing this voter suppression issue. It's a really great step. We have to push this issue. It is so important. And now, it's happened, unfortunately, it's a bit late. Did Greg Palast mention the 75,000 in Flint and Detroit that came up as part of these machines that counted the ballots as blank for president?
Right.
And then when they when they began to do a recount called by Stein, that they only got through 36, but all of the 36 showed Hillary Clinton for president instead of blank. It's so important to push this. My question for you is, why don't we hear more mainstream Democratic politicians? Why isn't that being run as ads? And even at the convention in 2016, I didn't hardly hear it mentioned at all.
There has been this fear in the Democratic Party since the early 2000s about talking about voting machines or anything that might cause people to think that the vote isn't perfect and pure and pristine and everything is wonderful. And the fear, and frankly, I think that Republican operatives have promoted this fear in the Democratic Party. You see a lot of this kind of trash talking of Democrats by people who are, quote, Democrats on message boards and whatnot, when in fact they're Republicans or there might even be trolls from some other country. But this fear that if you talk about these things, people won't show up to vote. No, I think if you talk about these things, number one, we'll get them fixed. And by not talking about them, you're participating, you're empowering the Republicans. And number two, people will get seriously pissed off and they'll show up in larger numbers to vote. I could see an ad put together by the Democratic Party that actually uses that clip of Paul Weyrich saying, I don't want everybody to vote, and all that. And then just saying, here in Georgia, Brian Kemp doesn't want you to vote. He took 591,000 people off the voting rolls. Vote for Stacey Abrams and double check your registration. I think they should be doing that, Ron. I really do. Thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
I mean, this is an opportunity for the Democratic Party. We'll be back. And welcome back, Dan in Buckley, Washington. Hey, Dan, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I love your show. I watch it nearly every day.
Thank you.
And I wanted to speak of solving global warming and the crisis the impending crisis that's going to happen if we don't change our energy policy.
Okay.
I want to speak specifically about hydrogen. Because the problem with solar and wind is the sun doesn't shine every day and the wind doesn't blow all the time.
Right. So hydrogen is a storage system.
All that energy can be used to produce hydrogen.
Right.
That can be stored and transported.
Yep.
With a hydrogen pipeline, you could transport it throughout the entire country.
Yep.
Also, hydrogen can be created from non-potable water. It can be used as a storage device, so when the sun doesn't shine, the wind doesn't blow. It's a flammable gas that produces no byproducts that any internal combustion engine can be converted to. And this was brought up to the Obama administration, and he just pretty much dismissed it.
The problem was the Hindenburg.
Excuse me?
I said the problem was the Hindenburg, Dan. We all, even those of us who weren't alive then, have that image of that Graf Zeppelin burning and, the humanity, and so we tend to think of hydrogen as...
fear. That's fear. I mean, natural gas explodes too. Homes blow up every day from natural gas leaks.
I know. I'm not saying that's a reason not to do hydrogen. Now with natural gas, they add a chemical to it to give it a smell. That rotten egg smell is not natural to natural gas, but they don't do anything to make it less explosive. Do you think that hydrogen is so much incrementally more volatile than natural gas that there should be some sort of a buffer added to it to reduce its volatility?
You could do that, but I mean, the fact of the matter, it's the most abundant supply of energy on the planet.
Well, it's the most abundant element in the universe, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, it's more abundant. The problem is there's very little profit to be made, so that's why it's not getting implemented, is because there's very little profit in it.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest problem right now is that we don't have a hydrogen infrastructure. So, if
yeah, I mean, but we didn't have the gasoline infrastructure until we developed it. We didn't have gas stations everywhere until they developed it. It's something that needs to be developed. But at some point, we're going to reach peak oil, and we're going to to make a change.
But see, there were over 100 auto companies in the United States in 1915. We were manufacturing internal combustion engines, and so that created a demand for kerosene, for gasoline, and for ethanol, which were all different fuels that were used in cars, in the early cars, mostly ethanol actually. And so people built gas stations or stills or refineries or whatever to supply those things, and you had all those.
The same thing will happen. Look at Iceland.
But first, somebody has to come out with a hydrogen car. Now, I realize that there are a couple of hydrogen fuel cell cars on the market right now, but I don't think they're being sold anywhere outside of California.
Well, that's possible, but I mean, another thing about hydrogen is it can be recombined. You get electricity as a byproduct.
Right.
It's not only just flammable; it can also be recombined.
Right. That's what I was talking about. You do that in a fuel cell. Yeah. Good point, Dan. Thanks for the call. We should be seriously considering hydrogen. It is a great storage system. It's 11 minutes before the hour. We'll be right back. Oh, hi. I was just meditating, listening to the sounds of the ocean from this app, from my brainwaves that are being detected by the Muse headband. To find out more about it, check out choosemuse.com, code TOM. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by SuperBeets. More information is available over at tomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com.
or by calling 800-568-9889. The new X chair, it's the X3, is just such a big upgrade from even the old X chair, which I think was one of the very best chairs, if not the best chair, office chair on the market. Check it out at xchairtom, T-H-O-M, xchairtom.com. Cameron Hughes travels the world looking for the finest wines and then bottles them in this lot way so that you can save an enormous amount of money. Last night, Louise and I had the 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley. It was extraordinary. You can learn more at chwine.com/Tom.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. And Ron in Fort Lauderdale. Hey, Ron, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Tom, hi. This concerns methane gas from farm animals.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you think it's due to the growth hormones, being that they've been allowed to put more growth hormones into the cattle, and that causes them to create more methane gas?
No, what's causing the methane is that these animals by and large are ruminants, particularly cows. Their natural diet is grasses. They wander around grasslands and chew the grass. Grass has very, very low levels of fat and of starch, and very high levels of fiber, and so the cow's entire system is designed to help break down that cellulose, that heavy fiber. But that's a very inefficient way of converting sunlight into calories. So what they do is they feed cows grains, corn, soybeans principally, and those grains are really rich in nutrients. They're higher in fats and they're much higher in starches. And so that overwhelms the digestive system of the cows, so all the bacteria that are in there to help them break down cellulose, which is itself a carbohydrate. It's made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, just like starches are. It's just a more complex carbohydrate. All those bacteria that are there to break down the cellulose instead go to work on the starch, and they go to work so fast and so aggressively that they produce cow farts, basically, methane gas. And it's a major contributor to global warming. Excellent question, though, Ron. Thank you very much for calling and asking it. Charlie in Southgate, California. Hey, Charlie, what's up?
Hey, Tom. How you doing today?
Good. What's on your mind?
The guy that you was just talking kind of took my topic. I've heard that, a big amount of methane is released in the air by our animal farms and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's cows and their digestive system. It's pigs. The pig waste is methanous, or whatever the word is, methogenic, and then of course all the fossil fuels involved in growing all those crops for those animals. It's there's lots of carbon outputs that come out of animal agriculture that by and large don't come out of growing fruits and vegetables and nuts.
Well, a little bit of the solution that I've tried to take, I quit eating meat.
It's a good first step. You'll live longer.
And the problem I'm having is, I get tired. I don't have any good recipes. I get tired of eating salads or steaming broccoli and rice.
Oh, you need a good cookbook, Charlie. You need, there's some great vegetarian cookbooks out there, and let's see, you're in Southgate, Michigan. That's in the Detroit area, isn't it? Southgate.
Oh, it's California, Southern California. Yeah.
Oh, California. I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, you've got to have good vegetarian restaurants around you where you can go check out some good variety of foods and get inspired. But Charlie, I want to get a couple more callers in here before the end of the hour, so I'm going to move along. But thanks for the call. Maurice in East Dublin, Georgia. Hey, Maurice, you wanted to talk about the governor's race that Greg Palast and I were talking about?
Yes. Actually, I didn't hear Greg, but I heard the young lady who called in earlier talking about the Missouri governor's race and how they were trying to use the same playbook. But nonetheless, I have confidence that Stacey Abrams, who I'm quite sure you know about, has full knowledge and awareness about what they would try to do, and has formulated countermeasures to that to the degree that she will be able to. So,
well, that's the challenge. Greg Palast gave Stacey Abrams the list of 591,000 voters in Georgia, more than 500,000 voters in Georgia, who Brian Kemp last year purged from the voting rolls. And sure enough, massively overrepresented on that list were names that were Hispanic, Asian, and African American. And she does not have a solution for that other than calling it out. They're suing right now. They're suing Brian Kemp and saying, you've got 30 days to produce that list for public display and to prove to us that these people actually moved out of the state. Because the rest of us didn't notice 591,000 people leaving Georgia last year.
Well, I'll say this, and obviously I live in Georgia. There are more Democrats than Republicans in this state, and the Republicans know that, as there are more Democrats than Republicans nationally.
Yep.
And they are the ones who are trying to employ these voter suppression tactics because they know that if it was a straight-up numerical comparison, they'd always lose.
Yep.
So Stacey is brilliant, and
Stacey is.
I don't know if you had her on your show or not, but again, I feel very confident that she knows what she needs to do, and she will be working diligently to do that as it relates to trying to counteract the chicanery that Brian Kemp and the Republicans will be employing.
Maurice, I hope you are right. I really hope you are right.
And also.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for the call. It's good to hear from you. Boy. Richie in Fort Solano, Florida. Hey, Richie, you wanted to get back to the green algae?
Hey, good afternoon, Tom.
Good.
Long-time caller. Listeners from 2006. I just wanted to correct the caller that you had from South Florida talking about the algae problem here.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a red tide. It's a blue-green algae.
The red tide was my phrase, not the caller's phrase. My bad,
okay.
Richie. Thank you for the correction.
All right. It's a microcystin or a cyanobacteria.
Right.
And that lives in fresh water, and it blooms with heavy nitrogen and phosphorus. And we have this Lake Okeechobee here in South Florida that when the dam reaches a certain elevation, the Corps of Engineers discharges water out of the lake. Right now, there's 90% blue-green algae in the lake. And so the discharges coming into the St. Lucie River is 1.2 billion gallons a day filled with this bacteria. And it flows into the river, into the Indian River Lagoon, and out to sea.
Yeah.
We've lost 40,000 acres of seagrass. Our oysters are wiped out. And this is all due to the plumbing.
And Richie, at that, I have to cut you off. I'm sorry, but thank you so much for the call and for the information and for setting the record straight. I really appreciate it. We will be back tomorrow. A fast-moving world that we live in and a lot to do before we sleep. Don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. Get out there, get active, tag. You're it. Make sure your voter registration has not been purged by some sleazy Republican. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
Cameron Hughes travels the world looking for the finest wines and then bottles them in this lot way so that you can save an enormous amount of money. Last night, Louise and I had the 2015 Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley. It was extraordinary. You can learn more at chwine.com/Tom. The new X chair, it's the X3, is just such a big upgrade from even the old X chair, which I think was one of the very best chairs, if not the best chair, office chair on the market. Check it out at xchairtom, T-H-O-M, xchairtom.com. Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. More information is available over at tomsbeets.com, THOMSBEETS.com, or by calling 800-568-9889. Oh, hi. I was just meditating, listening to the sounds of the ocean from this app, from my brainwaves that are being detected by the Muse headband. To find out more about it, check out choosemuse.com, code TOM.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.